So UFC 11, the Proving Ground, took place on September 20th, 1996 at the Augusta Civic Centre in, you guessed it, Augusta, Georgia. 4.5k in attendance tonight, 92,000 buys, but the buys aren't great, okay? They are suffering after the smear campaign from John McCain, and that's now 2 in a row under 100,000. Or maybe people just really hated UFC 9, but we start off in a galaxy far, far away apparently, with a highlight package where we run through some of our fighters. I suppose it's mostly just highlight clips, and then there's an actual emphasis, a focus on two fighters really. Tank Abbott, who is back from suspension, we'll get to that. They're trying to build him up, and they're also trying to build up Mark Coleman. They sort of make the visual connection that these two are going to fight tonight. So you would think that here, maybe we should put them together in the first round just to make sure that fight happens, instead of sort of trying to predict the future of this very real sport. It sends the wrong message here. But we come out of the highlight package, we come out of the open, and we go to the city of Augusta, which looks very nice, by the way. I don't know if I've got any viewers in Augusta, but it looks very nice. And they then start talking about cotton. And I don't think anybody wants that history lesson right there, buddy. Okay? Especially when they look at the building, the Cotton Exchange. Now, I'd never heard of this before, but I mean, no, we can't be doing this. The Cotton Exchange in 1886. Good Lord. Interesting note here, Igor Vochanchin was invited to this event, but he declined the offer. And I just thought I would mention that there for the Pride fans out there. They might appreciate that note. We will be reviewing Pride very soon, I have not forgot. But we get to the arena, and this just feels small. I don't know how to put that any other way, to be honest, but we get to Bruce Beck on commentary, who tells us Tank Abbott is returning after a 7-month suspension after the brawl in Bayamon. It happened outside the octagon, and if anybody in the comments can tell me what happened to Tank Abbott in Puerto Rico, I'll give you many thanks and pin the comment. Jeff Blatnick is here with Mark Coleman, who, with all the charisma of a chair, talks about how he's going to win, talks about Tank Abbott, so on and so forth. They're really pushing Tank Abbott here. But we play interview bingo. You can probably guess what he says. We then get Don Wilson and Tank Abbott, who is the most bothered guy ever, just blunt as fuck. He calls himself the Street Fighter, puts down the Pit Fighter name that was given to him by people at UFC. He didn't want that name, whatever. We now see the bracket, a few debutants here, a few returning fighters. We go over the rules and ways to win before getting to our first fight of the night. Something that's become a fixture of these early UFC events is the sort of freak show element. The really big fucking fat guy that we just call a sumo. Now, they don't call this guy a sumo, but he should not fucking be in here. So here comes Julian Sanchez. He's going to be up against Mark Coleman. And Sanchez, this is his first pro fight and his only pro fight, so that tells you how this one is going to go. I have no idea where they dig these people up from. I genuinely don't. It's as though they go into the fucking parking lot or dig some guy out the stand and say, here, do you want to get your ass beat tonight? But he looks like a heavyweight of today, to be honest. A real trailblazer in the sport. A man with a true vision of where the game is heading. Some may say a visionary. But he's got to go up against Mark Coleman, HGH'd to the max, practically leaking juice at this point. And this is just a lamb to slaughter. Rich Goins is back announcing, and I see Ken Shamrock in the back there, likely here to support his boy Bolander. Fight begins, and Mark Coleman almost pities this guy and is just waiting for him to give up. Applies the choke. He knows this is just fucked up. I have no idea where they got this guy from. Denny's, McDonald's, whatever. They shake hands after the fight. Coleman is through to the next round. Why even waste our time with this? And it's hard for me to feel bad for this guy. He turns up and didn't take a tremendous beating, still gets paid, whatever, but did we really need this? Was this a necessary first round fight, especially the way that this tournament ends up going? But our next fight is Reza Nasri, an Iranian wrestler, and he's up against Brian Johnson, who I was actually quite impressed with at UFC 10. He says he's keeping this on the feet and he wants to box Nasri. And so the fight actually just begins and Nasri shoots on Johnson. Johnson stuffs the takedown and then gets his own. Holy shit. What happened to the boxing? But I suppose it doesn't even matter. And Johnson TKOs Nasri and just freaks the absolute fuck out. After the fight, just screams fuck you at Nasri. Like, from his boots. He meant every single bit of that. I have no idea what happened that made him do that. Commentary saying Big John was late and that he apologised for it. I don't think it was so egregious, but apparently he apologised for being a punch too late. But, I mean, whatever, it happens. It's like, whatever. It's a bad knockout. And they show Big John either talking to one of the judges, or it might have been like the doctor's table or whatever, and it looks as though he's like, yeah, fucked up on that one, sorry. But again, I didn't think it was just so outrageous. Nasri's like, he looks kind of dead there, but sorry with the butt. I'm trying to enunciate better. I think this YouTube stuff might help with that, but not to worry. Next up, we get the return of Tank Abbott. He takes on Sam Adkins, who we seen get smashed by Don Frye at, I think, UFC 8. Commentary calls Tank UFC's original bad guy, and to me that's just in the eyes of the viewer who the bad guy is. To me, Royce Gracie was always the bad guy, but nobody would have called him, the UFC bad guy. Like, it's up to the viewer to determine the good and the evil in this world. But, like, to me, Tank's just a bit of a dick. The fight starts, Tank immediately takes down Adkins, which is very different for Tank Abbott. We don't normally see this. Normally he just charges at you and swings, but he ends up throwing some intermittent ground and pound. He doesn't really commit one way or the other to either pursue the finish or sort of hold control. He ends up holding the forearm on the throat of Adkins, who then taps. And would you look who it is in Tank Abbott's corner? I never even realised. And I don't know how long he's been here. If this is just his first night, his first event, he must be like nearly like his early 20s. But it's fucking the Huntington Beach bad boy, Tito Ortiz. Like, he can't be that far away from making his debut, actually, now that I think about it. But he's here, he's in the corner of Tank Abbott, and that is like an undefeated duo. Can you imagine running into those two on the street? Jesus Christ. That's him there on the left, by the way, and that's pre-CTE. This is a dangerous combination right here. But look, that's for a later date, the run of Tito Ortiz. Right now, we have Fabio Gurgel versus Jerry Bolander, who we will call JB for short. He makes his way to the octagon and daps up Shamrock before entering the cage. Shamrock, we've seen cage side at the first for the first fight announcements, and then I never seen him again until now. But JB is only 21 years old here, fighting out of Shamrock's gym, Lions Den, so you know what is coming, sadly. The fight begins, they clinch straight away, the PTSD, oh my god, the flashbacks to Shamrock. JB has his back up against the fence and does actually really well here. I will give him credit for using the fence to reverse the position and get a takedown of his own here. But he's now in the guard, and this is a familiar position. This is all we train at Lions Den. There's actually a motif, a manifesto on the wall. Step 1, get into your opponent's guard. Step 2, never pass the guard. Never leave the guard. And that's it. That's what you learn here at the Lions Den. Now, a lot of fence work from JB. He actually uses it quite well. He slaps the absolute shit out of Fabio here at one point. Once he does that, they end up breaking, or he hits him sort of on the break. And after the break, JB just kicks him whilst he's down, but JB has shoes on, so he'll get fined for kicking him, and commentary say that if he does that again, he'll be disqualified. Big John doesn't break it, he doesn't split them up. he gives a sort of warning as the action is going. But anyone who hasn't watched the previous reviews, fighters that wear shoes aren't allowed to kick, only those with bare feet or wrapped ankles. And I get that, I'm part of that gang, but JB just tries to kick him again. Like an idiot. Does he not know what the rules are or what Big John is saying? I don't understand. JB pulls the ghillie and spits out the mouthpiece, but Jurgel escapes, sorry. He's able to then pass the guard, and in doing so, JB's able to reverse the position. Now he's on top. Using the cage to keep his position, commentary can already tell this thing's going the distance, and we're only 6 minutes in. We have 9 to go. Whilst we're here and we have a ways to go, commentary say that Jurgel was complaining about there being time limits in the fight. Is this just a jiu-jitsu thing? Are all these jiu-jitsu guys just such bitches? How is Marco Huas the only Brazilian not scared about a time limit? We need more luta livre guys over here instead of these jiu-jitsu guys. Shout out to luta livre. I stand with you guys. We do not lie on our backs like this, because Jurgel is really starting to piss me off here. We finally leave the guard. The crowd erupt, and then we're right back to it. We're only at 12 minutes, and thank God there's no overtime here, but we still have 3 to go. But don't worry, I will spare you. We go to a decision, and JB wins by unanimous decision. The crowd could not give a single fuck about either of these guys. And after a pretty good first round of fights, and even a decent start to this fight, they just killed the crowd with the last, say, 3/4 of the fight. But JB's through to the next round anyway, so he doesn't care. In our first semi-final, we get... Oh, by the way, this woman here, she was here at UFC 1, and I think maybe 2. Who is she? Some guy asked her to sign a magazine. Who is that? If anybody could put that in the comments as well, I would appreciate that, because that's annoying me, because they put the camera on her and don't mention her name. No one references her, but she's clearly somebody. I don't understand. But again, Mark Coleman versus Brian Johnson, first semi-final. This sounds like a decent fight just on the face of it, only 15 pounds between these two. And that's not actually too bad at this point in time for UFC. And look at, did you see Javier Mendez is also here? He has been around for a long time, folks. If you're a new fan and just seen this guy with Khabib and Islam, he has been doing this shit at AKA for a very long time. And he is here in 1996 cornering fighters. So I feel like we must have seen him before now, because commentary's referenced AKA, but this is the first time that I've actually recognised him and seen him in the corner. Anyway, fight begins. They make no contact for 30 seconds, which is rare. But Johnson starts using leg kicks, which could have been a good strategy if Coleman then didn't just shoot in, take him down with relative ease, spams headbutts and punches before Johnson just turns over and the fight is stopped. And there is so much roid rage in Mark Coleman. He is, there's fired up. Jeff Blatnick says there may be an element of over-celebrating. An element? No. He's gone so ballistic, Mark Hall would be telling this guy to calm down. And it's as though we have this secret where we can't say here, do you think this guy might be on something? And Brian Johnson's on the sauce too, just so you know. But look, his family's in the crowd, and that's very nice for him. But moving onward, or in fact, not moving onward, because commentary is stalling right now, which means only one thing as we await an alternate being picked, and we have decided that it is going to be Scott Ferozzo, who competed at UFC 8 in the David versus Goliath tournament. If you remember, he got choked out by Jerry Bolander in hilarious fashion when he lay there on the floor like a beached whale. Scott's here with Don Frye, and he rips his shirt off like Hulk Hogan. 350 pounds, by the way, against a near 300-pound Tank Abbott. Bruce Beck says that Tank's hobbies include going to bars, getting crazy, and raising hell. I think this might have had something to do with the brawl and Buy Him On, or the Buy Him On brawl, or whatever he tagged it as earlier. I can't prove that, but I think that's Bruce's intrusive thoughts coming out here, because he clearly knows what happened. and nobody's mentioned anything so far, like either at this event or the previous ones where he's been on commentary. I'm guessing that some sort of bar brawl in Puerto Rico has something to do with his suspension. Tank tells commentary to let people know that he has more assault charges on his resume than any other fighter in UFC, and I would be inclined to agree with that. Now, I don't know Tank personally, but you just get that feeling when you look at him. So the fight starts and they just swing. This is more typical of the Tank Abbott fight, not the attempted and successful takedown, but just standing, swinging like, you know. And Tank presses Frozo against the cage before they just again devolve into just a slugfest. Tank clinches again against the fence, and they need to censor Scott saying "fuck you" to Tank Abbott. I couldn't hear what was said before that. But Frozo in the clinch starts landing knees and some hands on Tank. Then Scott just starts teeing off crazy. It gets split up, gets broken by Big John to check on the cut at Frozo's eye. But they let it go on, thankfully. And then they just start swinging again immediately after the break. About 3.5 minutes, Tank has Frozo pressed against the cage, and Tank is holding the cage to keep him stuck there. But Frozo is hitting Tank with these knees that are definitely hurting Tank. And that begs the question, why stay here? Why stay here and eat these knees? Why not break or attempt a takedown? We've seen Frozo get subbed before, and that's how Tank won his last fight in literally the last round about half an hour ago. I mean, half an hour is a guess, but you know what I mean. Literally his last fight. And instead, he just stands there, willingly accepting these knees to the body, whilst in a dominant position. Like, he's in the dominant position, but he's taking more damage here than Frozo. Tank finally attempts a trip after about 9 minutes, unsuccessful. Frozo just has these nasty knees up the middle. The punches he's throwing are just creating like a ripple effect on Tank's excess fat. They're pretty ineffective, but the knees are really good. And I ask again, why is Tank continuing to stay here and eat this damage? He has his fingers locked into the fence, holding himself here. Like, Tank's in position to split this up if he wants to, but he waits for Big John to do it, which I disagreed with, because Tank is in the dominant position again. He's controlling the fact that they're stuck there. He could have broken it up, but Scott was actually benefiting from that situation, so why break it up? But then again, I'm not a referee. They are split up. They start swinging again. Scott gets the better of the exchange. Tank presses him against the fence again. The crowd start booing and chatting bullshit. And now commentary's saying that Mark Coleman must be laughing right now. This is the same shit that happened at UFC 10, where Coleman goes in there against a much more tired opponent. Like, this is just bullshit. Like, the round ends, we go to 3-minute overtime. They start swinging again before we just resort to the fence. There's Don Frye right behind the action. Commentary asking for this to be broken up already, which is hilarious, considering how long commentary would spend talking about the greatness of Royce Gracie while he lay there for minutes on end doing nothing. Last 10 seconds, we get a bit of a scrap before Tank just reverts to type in the last second. We go to the decision, and it is unanimous for Scott Frozo. Scott looks like he was about to keel over and die a second ago, but then he gets all fired up, celebrating after the decision. He gives a fired up interview talking about making it to the final. He gives all the credit to Don Frye. He says that the fight against Mark Coleman is going to go the exact same way. And now UFC looks pretty fucking stupid, having promoted this potential showdown between Tank and Coleman, that now you, as the customer who bought the pay-per-view, will not be getting. Here we go, UFC 11, the Proving Ground final, Scott Frozo versus Mark Coleman. And now I understand why we are stalling here. Scott just went through 18 minutes, and wait a second, no, we now see the bracket, and now Troven, I know it looks like Travern, but Bruce Beck calls him Troven, so we'll go with that. He's been put into the final to take on Mark Coleman, even though we just seen Scott and he was fine and looking forward to the final. Commentary say that the cut above his eye may be the reason for him pulling out. We see Tank Abbott come out here shaking hands with people in the crowd, laughing, joking. We then see Coleman with his coach waiting to go out, speaking with someone in a shirt and tie. Meanwhile, Tank is out here, again laughing and joking. Commentary says he's coming back for the Ultimate 1996. That's our next event. We'll get to that soon. We make it to the back of the back, and Don Frye is shaking hands with his old coach. No, Don, he celebrated your downfall. What are you doing? He was swinging that towel around going crazy when he thought you lost at UFC 10. But now we hear that Troven has broke his hand, and with those back of the head punches that he won his alternate fight with. Now Bruce Beck is saying, well, what about the alternates that lost their fights? Could we see them get the call? Tank Abbott is literally sitting at the octagon door right now, asking to be picked. Nearly. I can't confirm that, but it looks that way. Like, I don't think anyone would complain about that. That is literally the fight you've been promoting, hoping that it would happen. He's at least won a fight tonight. And it was only a decision loss that a few events ago would have been considered a draw. And the fans would want to see that fight. So out comes Mark Coleman, and that's it. That is the tournament. Nobody's left to fight Coleman. And even although if we needed an opponent, Tank is right here, but that would ruin the integrity of the tournament, which has so much integrity as it stands. We seen Julian Sanchez. We know you don't give a shit about the integrity of a tournament. Coleman says he's going to be at the Ultimate, but they've found someone for him to fight in an exhibition for the fans in attendance. I think it wasn't explained very well, but Coleman is apparently on the same side of the bracket as Don Frye, so they're trying to promote that fight for the Ultimate. At least they've learned from this situation here. But like, he's name dropping other fighters. He'd love to fight Shamrock, and he also names Kevin Randleman as his exhibition opponent. It's a good day for the Pride FC mentions. This is great foreshadowing for the channel, by the way, guys. Thank you so much. Igor Vorchanchin, now Kevin Randleman. Like, and we even see Randleman in the octagon here. I'll put it in there at the end. You see a sort of top-down view of the octagon with Coleman and Randleman in it. But we do not get to see that fight. That fight is not here on Fight Pass on this pay-per-view. And I don't know if it exists. I don't know if that fight was like on the tapes when they sold the video for the event. If it is, I would like to see it. But that's it. Bruce Beck brings the show to a close. And that's us. That is UFC 11 Proving Ground. Not all bad. Obviously a disappointing finish and start, now that I think about it. Sanchez should never have been in here, but at least it was quick. Johnson and Tank had good first round fights, even if JB was boring as fuck. Then again, he is up against a jiu-jitsu guy. It was like Shamrock and Gracie light. You know what I mean? It was just not fun. I enjoyed the semi-final fights, even if Tank and Frozo got tedious at the end, to be fair to it, but it was fine enough. I just wish they would have used Randleman as an alternate. I bet Coleman would have said it was fine. They're friends. They're about to fight anyway. UFC doesn't have a problem with it, so clearly not an issue, but hey-ho. Between Coleman, Frye, Tank Abbott, we have some names already announced for the Ultimate 1996, and that will be the next review on the channel, so subscribe, hit the notify bell, find out when that drops, which should be soon. Like the video, comment your own thoughts below. We are almost done with 1996. We're about to get real underground in 1997. Soon enough, Pride will be on the way. We'll see you all very soon. UFC 11.5, the Ultimate 2, the Ultimate 96, the Ultimate 1996 took place on December 7th, 1996, and yes, I probably will switch between all of the names for this event, and that just has to not be a problem because it is happening. We open with a parental advisory which has been missing these last few events, but it's back here. Video package, pretty good. We highlight Ken Shamrock, Don Frye, Tank Abbott, Chemo. Chemo has returned again. We then see Varlins, Goodridge, Cal Worsham and Brian Johnson before opening up the gate to Birmingham, Alabama. We are back once again. The last time we were here was for UFC 10. We see Bruce Beck on commentary, who lets us know that 150k is on the line here. He tells us that Mark Coleman is out, he has a virus and is unable to compete. Jeff Blatnick is back to join Bruce, who does a nice job running down the card, and we see the bracket here. Now, I made a top 10 list to determine the best fighter from UFC, like the first 10 numbered events, And I put Chemo in ahead of Varlins, and that is about to be put to the test here. Because I was debating that choice, but like, see, when I watch these events like back, I obviously have guys that I like more than others, and I want some guys to win, but I don't feel the same way as when I watch like live modern fights, right? But I was watching this with fucking bated breath because I need to be vindicated picking Chemo over Varlins. I was watching this like not worried, right? Because it's not that serious. But I thought I was really debating Varlins and Chemo, and I need to be right on this. We run through the rules as per usual. This is the first event to ban the fence grab, so fuck you, Tank Abbott. Fuck you, Jerry Bolander. You guys ruined it for everybody else. We run down our first fight, Brian Johnson, Ken Shamrock, which doesn't sound too bad. We get propaganda video for Brian Johnson where they call him a quadruple threat. I mean, watch out Anthony Smith. This guy is double the double threat. He's 2-2 in UFC. His 2 losses to Coleman and Frye. Not bad. But for a tournament to be the best of the best, I suppose in terms of skill, he is one of the better guys we've seen who hasn't won anything. We then get to Shamrock. We get a propaganda video for him, former super fight champion. 100% deserves a spot here. I think because Severn's the super fight champion, he doesn't compete in the tournaments. The winner will then face Dan Severn. But Shamrock was on Conan O'Brien to promote this event, which I suppose in 1996 was a big deal, given the circumstances surrounding UFC at this point particularly. Frank Shamrock is in Ken's corner here, Javier Mendez and Brian Johnson's, and I love seeing these guys in the corners like before you really know who they are and before they're famous. We've seen it with Tito Ortiz at the last event. The fight begins, Shamrock has the MMA gloves on for I think the first time. Not like he'll use them, that I'm joking, but he shoots instantly into guard. That's what we train here at Lions Den. Go and watch UFC 11 review and you'll understand what I mean. Shamrock tries his best to land ground and pound, which he actually ends up landing some pretty big shots. But you might see here, Brian Johnson has his hands wrapped inside the gloves. Shamrock has tape around his wrists. But unless that's black tape on his hands, I was doing my best to try and see, but I think it's just the leather on the gloves. I don't think they're wrapped under there. I think he has gloves on, which just means he's landing some of these brutal shots with not a lot of protection on his hands. Eventually Brian Johnson has to tap after Shamrock puts the forearm choke on him just 5 minutes into the fight. And I'll just say this now, seeing as we're talking about Shamrock and we won't see him again tonight. He did indeed break his hand. He wouldn't be able to continue in the tournament. This is the last time that we see Ken Shamrock in UFC for a long time. After he broke his hand, he would leave MMA. He would go to the WWF, now WWE, where he had success before then returning to MMA and the UFC at UFC 40. Look, he leaves after the money dries up, if we're looking at it from a realist point of view here. The pay-per-views are taking a tanking. John McCain and his love of boxing money, look into it. His campaign is bullshit. So UFC isn't really in position to be paying guys like they were before, and Shamrock could make bank in WWF. So he decides to leave, which is another star of the UFC gone. And we'll get to another one who's about to leave later on. We then get a propaganda video for Goodridge, former UFC runner-up at number 8. Similar to Brian Johnson, where his record isn't really the best, but his losses are to good fighters. And he himself isn't bad, so I'm not mad about his involvement here. We then get Don Frye propaganda video. He's a former winner and runner-up, much deserving of his spot, so in a rematch of the UFC 8 final, we get Don Frye versus Gary Goodridge. Goodridge at UFC 8 said that he suffered from fatigue in the final, and he put his loss down to his stamina. So let's see what happens then in the first fight of the night. They clinch and trade. Frye, I would say, gets the better of the opening exchanges as the two clinch against the fence, but it's close. Like, there's not really a clear and obvious winner. If somebody said that Goodridge got the upper hand here, then I mean, I'm not going to argue with you. But we sort of stay here for minutes. We trade shots back and forth. Nothing devastating. I have no idea why Goodridge is wearing the fucking gi. Goodridge has said before, like in interviews after the fact, he wore it because Hoist Gracie would wear it. He would wear a white gi, and then he thought, oh, well, he's in the white gi, I'll just wear the black gi. But it's just not practical in a fight, especially when you don't use jiu-jitsu. So I 100% believe him when he says before UFC he had not trained in anything other than arm wrestling. He had no clue what he was doing. He just wanted to go in there and fight. I believe him. So Goodridge gets the takedown. He's on top of Frye. Not a lot of action. Frye tries to isolate the arm of Goodridge from the bottom, and he's actually able to transition from the bottom to backside, almost to a sort of sprawl, like north-south style. Like, it's actually pretty good. He grabs Goodridge's leg in a sort of takedown attempt, and he's able to get on top. And I swear to you, I swear to God, I can't be any more honest than this. Frye gets on top of Goodridge, and Goodridge just taps out without anything being applied. He submitted, he tapped out to the full guard position. I'm not even joking. He must have seen these previous fights and thought, no, fuck no, I'm not staying here until the time limit. He just tapped because he was so tired. Because obviously he was tired. He's wearing the full fucking gi. So there he is, riding the Gracie train on out of here. Next up, we have Tank Abbott, who, okay, his record at this point is whatever, but he is a star. He's a tournament runner-up, and again, one of the biggest names that they could really put in here, so I have no problem with Tank getting a spot. But I've been running down the credentials of the competitors so far for this reason. How the fuck is Cal Worsham in here? He was given it all this and that about how he wants a super fight. How did Chemo get the super fight? This guy's 1-1. He beat Zane Frazier, who's winless and shit. And that was a gimme fight after you got put on a shirt by Paul Varlins and your corner was pouring one out for you. Like, here you go then. Here's your super fight. Tank Abbott. Let's see what you can do. So Tank hits Worsham about as hard as I've ever seen anybody get hit. Tank picks him up and tries to throw him out of the octagon. Again, I'm not making this up. Tries to pick him up and throw him over the top of the cage. Worsham is hanging on to the top of the cage before Tank just takes him down, dunks him. Tank passes guard to side control, does nothing with it, decides to move back into guard for whatever reason. And we're almost just sort of stuck here in this limbo where Tank will maybe land a strike and then get pushed out, come back in, land a strike. But nothing really major's happening before he ends up, I think he lands one strong ground and pound strike before Worsham then taps. Big John steps in. Tank 100% throws another one after the fight's already stopped. And Worsham, now he's fucking full of it. He decides to stand up and go ballistic. Big John has to jump in, grab Worsham, throw him against the fence, while Worsham just screams that he just wants Tank disqualified. Big John says that's up to Art Davey, our commissioner. You will have seen him before in the previous reviews. You might see him cage side in some of these photos. But Big John calls it bullshit, he understands, but raises Tank's hand anyway, and Tank Abbott is through to the next round. This was hilarious. And as someone who is a Cal Worsham hater, I say that, he's done nothing to me personally, I don't hate him, right? But see when people are like this, who are very loud without the credentials to back it up, you like to see this sort of thing happen from time to time, even if Tank Abbott is a complete dick. But there's Big John explaining what happened, because there is sort of confusion. Commentary keep running back the replays going like, did Tank hit him? Yes, he did. Absolutely. And I think they tried to say, oh, well, did Tank know the referee split it up? Tank 100% knew that the referee had split it up. And he has his own section here. Tank is a star. But next, in our final first round fight, we have Chemo versus Paul Varlins. Now, this is the fight I had my eyes on. Bruce Beck says that Chemo was the replacement for Mark Coleman. So it wasn't even Cal Worsham. They spent all that time at UFC 11 focusing on Tank Abbott versus Mark Coleman, only to not deliver that fight. And then they didn't even plan on doing it here either. What the fuck? And if this was anyone else other than Chemo here, I would have a much bigger problem, but I actually do want to see this fight. And so Chemo has cut down, shredded, by the way, 235. From what he was, that is shredded, right? Varlins has actually instead put on the beef, gone crazy, up to 340. But in his interviews before, he was telling people he was 360, so we'll see what that looks like. And like, I'm going to say this now because I haven't mentioned it already. Ring announcer Manny Garcia, great voice for the job. I think he does well here. Chemo looks so skinny compared to how he looked at UFC 3 and even UFC 8. And he's still 235. Like, he's still a big guy, but looks so slender. I think he might just be off the steroids. Chemo, like an idiot, shoots in instantly, gets sprawled on, and he manages to get back to the feet. I'm not even going to give him credit. I just don't know if Varlands understands, like, the position that he was in there. He's able to get back to his feet, body locks Varlands against the fence, putting his head in danger of a guy you know has good 12 to 6 elbows. And he's persistent with this body lock. You can't body lock a guy down that's this size. He should be looking to level change, grab the legs, and look, he goes for the fucking toss again like an idiot. And now Varlands, who's over 100 pounds heavier than Chemo, is now lying on top of him, landing some decent shots as well, by the way, from the top. And he's looking for the forearm choke. Varlands' shots, like, quickly, you notice it, like, maybe after 30 seconds or so, they're slowing down. And he's another one who's wearing the gloves with no wrapping on the hands. So this almost just negates the point of the gloves providing any protection at all. When, like, you need the wrap as well. They work in tandem together, or else you will break your hands like Shamrock done earlier. He doesn't have wrist tape on either. He is really going for it. Like, he is 100% injuring himself here. But anyways, minutes later, we are still here. Chemo is adopting this bullshit Gracie style. They've even got his name up with the jiu-jitsu sign. Not good. But he's almost able to reverse this position, or whatever you call this. He gets into, like, mount at 45-degree angles up against the fence. He lands some nasty ground and pound. Feel free to step in, John, here, by the way, at any point today. Thanks for that. Both men look dead on the floor. Chemo leaves the octagon almost with a wedgie, wearing Speedos that would make Dennis Hallman blush. But there we have it. And Chemo is into our semi-final. And commentary now announced that Shamrock has indeed broke his hand, and he will be substituted with a guy called Steve Nelmark. But look, here we go. There is the bracket. Nelmark versus Abbott, and Frye versus, well, we'll get to that. And so we then get promo for UFC 12 titled Judgment Day. Dan Severn and Scott Ferrozo have been announced to be there. They interview Big John, who has a good assessment of the Chemo Varlands fight, and then they speak about Tank Worsham, or not Tank Worsham, but Tank and Worsham, which again he answers fairly, just details what happened, doesn't get emotional or throw his own opinions in there or bias. Like, he just gives his account of what happened. Big John always speaks well, I think, when he gets interviewed. But out comes Steve Nelmark. We haven't seen him before. For his fight against Tank Abbott, he beat Marcus Bossett in his alternate fight, who we have seen Bossett, and yes, he is shit. But then here comes Tank, and the fight begins. Tank lands early, which sends Nelmark back into the fence, and I can't believe this knockout is coming. Tank pressures him against the fence, gets a big slam on Nelmark into half guard. The crowd is making a whole lot of noise after that. They stand back up. Tank has more hands for Nelmark, who gets folded like a fucking deck chair by Tank Abbott. I mean, slumped. The man has folded back in on himself. Just nasty from Tank. An absolutely hellacious KO. Steve here looks like he has gone to see God, or maybe even Satan. I don't know what he gets up to on his day-to-day, but Jesus Christ, can we get the defibrillators out for this guy? Maybe an EpiPen. Steve is in serious trouble right now, like end of life trouble. Meanwhile, Tank Abbott has made it to his second UFC tournament final. I doubt he cares, but Jesus Christ, I was not expecting that. I've seen Tank Abbott's highlights before, and so I have seen some of his brutal knockouts. Like, this one completely escaped my mind. I didn't know that was coming up there. That caught me off guard when he was sitting there folded back in on himself like that. That was That was worrying. We've seen some bad knockouts. Tank has handed one out before, that guy John Matua that needed the oxygen mask. Like this, he caught him right on the ear, bang, down like that. That could have been nasty, but we did see Neil Mark eventually get back to his feet for anyone that cared if he was still alive. But then we get Scott Ferozzo doing an interview with Bruce Beck, looking fucking crazy with his shades, the chain, the gold jacket. Who the fuck is this guy? He cuts this promo drifting in and out of being a heel, and then Bruce Beck makes fun of his weight, saying he looked pretty out of shape against Jerry Bolander, which I thought was funny because he was out of shape and he looked like a beached whale lying there choked out on the floor. But you can tell Scott takes this well. He does a nice promo. It's pure WWF at this point, but it's entertaining nonetheless. I'm looking forward to seeing him at UFC 12. Oh my fucking god, no. We have to watch now Mark Hall again. Well, at least we won't have to watch him for very long, and hopefully you'll have nothing to celebrate here. He's taken the spot of Chemo, who was either too tired or too injured to continue. They don't tell you he's an alternate. He was selected to face Don Frye. He beat Felix Mitchell in under 2 minutes, and now Big John has said, I believe in his book, he felt as though this fight was fixed. Mark Hall has gone on to say this fight was fixed. I don't think Don Frye has spoken about it, but Mark Hall said he felt pressure to take a dive here. Now this is another rematch. Don Frye, he fought Goodridge at UFC 8, he fought Mark Hall at UFC 10. It took Don Frye 10 minutes to finish Hall, who took an exorbitant amount of punishment to the body. But here, the fight starts 20 seconds in, Mark Hall pulls guard, Frye escaped easily and locks in what looks like a heel hook before Hall screams and taps. Yeah, this was 100% rigged. Mark Hall's manager came out with Mark Hall and left with Don Frye because they have the same manager, which is almost suspect, but I'm not a fan of Mark Hall. But he's got a bit of dig in him, and I don't think he would just pull guard and then just let Frye go. To be fair, if you were fixing a fight, he does a great job of selling it. He sells it so well. He gets carried out of here because he apparently can't walk, even though you see him clearly put weight on both of his feet, rendering the carrying pretty pointless. But there you have it. Don Frye will fight Tank Abbott in the final of the Ultimate 96. We go to commentary, and this is the sort of stalling between semi-final and finals. Bruce Beck tells us that we are now going to split the tournaments into 2 4-man brackets, one for fighters under £200 and one for fighters over £200. You can sort of think of it as a heavyweight, light heavyweight division. We hear that the winner of the Ultimate, like we suspected, will then fight the super fight champion. Like the last time where Dan Severn won the Ultimate, he then went on and fought Ken Shamrock in the fight that shall not be spoken of again. Because we had to do it the first time, we won't do it for a second time. This time Dan Severn will look to unify the Ultimate winner's belt, whatever that is, and the super fight belt to make the very first UFC undisputed heavyweight champion. That will happen at UFC 12. We then get promo for the UFA, the Ultimate Fighting Alliance, where our commentary tells us that if you want to learn UFC style fighting and become a UFC fighter, call this number and register with UFA, and one day we may see you in the octagon. I want to know how that call goes when you phone that number. We then get an interview between longtime friends Dan Severn and Jeff Blatnick. They talk about Dan Severn's wrestling career and their relationship. This is a nice interview. You can see that these guys are genuine friends, and I'll just put it out there now. Jeff Blatnick has done such a good job on commentary. He's improved a lot since his first events alongside Jim Brown to now, where he and Bruce Beck have a good partnership, and Don Wilson's a welcome addition when he's here. I know Jeff Blatnick has since passed away, and thankfully he's in the UFC Hall of Fame, but everybody speaks very highly of him and his impact on UFC and MMA as a whole. You can look it up yourself, but just his contributions to what we see on screen right now as I'm reviewing it, he's done a really great job, so just to put that out there. We do some complaining here, but I do also like to give some praise where it's deserved. So the time has arrived. We get to the final of the Ultimate 1996, 150k on the line. Don Frye versus Tank Abbott. The fight starts. Tank Abbott floors Don Frye with a stiff jab. He swarms Frye, who gets to his feet quickly. These two start slugging it out in the octagon. Tank, with some of the hardest shots I have ever seen, and Don Frye just eats them. Just eats them. I have no idea how. But Tank Abbott, I swear to God, I can't believe this, has Don Frye near dead to rights at this point. Like, Frye cannot eat another one of these shots, I don't think. But then Tank ends up tripping over his own feet, falling backwards, and in trying to get back up, he gives his back to Don Frye, who jumps on it, gets the rear naked choke, and the victory. I do not believe this. Look at Don Frye's face when he gets up here. Like, I cannot believe that this happened. But there you have it, Don Frye, the winner of the Ultimate 1996, the winner of $150,000, and he wins the worst looking belt we have seen in UFC to this point. I actually think the UFC tournament belts do look quite nice. But we get an interview with Don Frye after the fact. Look at his face. Oh, man. I like Don Frye. I don't really mind that he won. But we get an interview with Don Frye, who is a gracious winner. And we get an interview with Tank Abbott, who is hilarious. And see, if you know that it wouldn't end in a bar fight, you would love to have a drink with these guys. They are just terrific. But we then see a promo for a pay-per-view on New Year's Eve. 6 hours of UFC fights. Now that's a New Year's party I would want to go to. They then say that there's 4 never-before-seen fights. Now I would assume that they're just random alternate matchups. But I would love to know if they put Mark Coleman versus Kevin Randleman, the exhibition. I would love to know if they put that on there, or if that's just chock full of bullshit alternate fights between cans. But I guess if you were there at a New Year's Eve watch party for UFC, you can tell me what those alternate fights were. If you remember, if you were sober that night and you remember, let me know. But now Don Frye will take on his best friend and corner man, Dan Severn, at UFC 12. Of course he won't. This was the last time we would actually see Don Frye in UFC. He would follow Shamrock into professional wrestling. He would sign with New Japan, not WWE, before returning to MMA, but he never returns to UFC. At least he went out here with a win. We will see Don Frye eventually when we start working our way through Pride, but again, like with Jeff Blatnick, while we're here, we'll just give him the praise. An absolute joy to watch. In these early days of UFC, I don't think he had a bad fight. The worst was probably that Goodridge one. But he entered 3 tournaments. He won 2 of them. He was a runner-up in the 3rd and leaves with a 9-1 UFC record, his only loss to Mark Coleman. And we know the circumstances around that. But speaking of Mark Coleman, he will then take the place of Don Frye when we get to UFC 12. It will be Dan Severn versus Mark Coleman for the first time, for the first ever UFC Heavyweight Championship. Sure to be a good one. Alongside that, we have the debut of the Phenom Vitor Belfort. So what can he do in his first UFC appearance at just 19 years old? We lost a star. We've lost 2 in Ken Shamrock, in Don Frye. But can Vitor Belfort replace them? Can he? Will he go on to do anything in his career? Will the Phenom live up to the name? I suppose we shall just have to find out. But as for UFC 11.5, the Ultimate 96, Ultimate 2, what have you, not a bad tournament, or maybe it just caught me on a good day because there was only really one great knockout, Tank Abbott, KO of the night, and the final was also pretty good. I was vindicated, picking Chemo over Varlins, which helps. This wasn't terrible. It wasn't my favourite either. Frye and Goodridge 2 went a while without really going anywhere, with a disappointing finish. Chemo and Varlins didn't really go anywhere, but had a great finish. Shamrock and Johnson was kind of whatever, but it's a shame that was Shamrock's last appearance, I suppose, for a long time. But things did really pick up at the end. Believe it or not, I was happy. I didn't have to watch Mark Hall versus Don Frye. Again, I don't care if it was rigged. I do not need to see that rematch. It lasted 22 seconds. It lasted, no, 20 seconds. And that's all good with me. So the final really delivered, even with that ridiculous ending. I cannot believe Tank Abbott literally just get knocked off balance and that was it. It was done. Ridiculous ending to the tournament, but all in all, a fine tournament, even if we lost a couple of stars along the way. I have a feeling somebody might be arriving just shortly that'll pick things up. But that's it for UFC 11.5. Thank you very much for watching. Comment your own thoughts on this tournament and the review. Remember to like the video and subscribe for more content as it comes. Hit the notify bell to stay up to date with all of that, and I will see you all next time. So UFC 12 Judgment Day took place on February 7th, 1997 in Dothan, Alabama at the Dothan Civic Center. 3,100 people in attendance and 122,000 pay-per-view buys. We open, as always, with the video package with just the most insane opening line ever. Amidst a torrent of controversy that runs deeper than Niagara Falls, it's the Ultimate Fighting Championship. We are nowhere near Niagara Falls. Like, Dan Severn's from Michigan, Coleman from Ohio, the show is in Alabama. What the fuck are you talking about right now? Video this time not really filled with highlights as such, but it's just kind of promo for our main event, Dan Severn, Mark Coleman, heavyweight title. We don't open up the gate. We don't even, seeing isn't even believing. We instead just come out of that to Dothan, Alabama, which at the time was recently voted the nicest place to live in Alabama. I wonder how it's doing now. I don't know if I reach anyone in Alabama, but turns out that the UFC attempted to have this in Niagara Falls, New York. They couldn't get it sanctioned. They then attempted to move it to Oregon. Got banned there as well. So now we are back in Alabama, and we just didn't bother changing the video package. But we come up to the arena. Bruce Beck, as always, gives some promo for the fight between the Beast and the Hammer before telling us about our two tournaments. We get Jeff Blatnick's thoughts on the weight division tournaments. He's for it, and to be honest, I can go either way. I sort of like the David and Goliath aspect of early UFC, but I think we could actually bring this to an ultimate situation where we get 4 winners from each side. They all come together in one tournament, but that is wishful thinking because there are no ultimates anymore, sadly. But that would have been good though. We get a look at the lightweight tournament, and for fuck's sake, we need to watch Jerry Bolander again. Fucking hell. We cannot escape these Lions Den fighters, man. Like, say what you want about Hoist Gracie, and I have. At least he didn't bring the boys with him like Shamrock did to just stink the joint out, man. But, look, we have a few names here who we'll visit in a minute. Heavyweight tournament looks like we have Scott Ferozzo, who we've seen before, and Vitor Belfort for the first time. The Phenom has arrived, 19 years old. We'll see what he can do. Main event, Coleman versus Severn. And you might have seen him there. Joe Rogan, full head of hair, pierced ear, absolute cursed image, 29 years old. He's our correspondent in the back who's going to fill us in with updates when we need him. We go over the rules and such, you know the drill. Shamrock's here at the table, and he would debut for WWE in 2 weeks' time, but he's here tonight to do commentary. He's actually not bad, but we get Bolander against Rene Martinez. We'll call him Ray. He basically just says, I'll do the opposite of what my opponent wants, and tries to say that that gives him control over the fight, even though he's just admitting, I'm going to wait and see what my opponent wants to do, and then I'll just do the opposite, literally giving control to your opponent. Ken speaks nicely of Bolander, so you know he has some bullshit waiting for somebody. And the fight opens up, and Bolander throws some leg kicks. They explain the rules later on, but I was very confused as to why he wasn't warned or there are no points, but you get what I mean. We'll talk about that rule change a little later on, but Bolander gets the takedown, some nice scrambles. JB takes the back and the choke and the win. So he advances to the final of the lightweight tournament. Now, I don't know if this is merch or this stuff's just handed out to crew, but I need to know if some of this still exists so I can get it. But you can see that they're definitely taking the high ground here, completely not bothered by the New York Athletic Commission banning them from the state, and they're taking it really well. Next up, we have Ismail versus Takahashi. Those are the names we're going with, because I don't know how to pronounce that guy's first. I don't know how to pronounce Israel's first name, or Ismail, not Israel. But that's our second semi-final. We haven't seen either of these guys before. Ismail has some Vale Tudo wins. Takahashi has some mixed results in Pancrase, but he's here. He's probably friends with Shamrock, which means I'm very nervous. I mean, they've fought each other before. Shamrock has to know what this guy's about, but again, that makes me nervous. What does Shamrock think is like a good fighter? Now, I can't actually put this in the video because it'll be too long in UFC, you know what it's like. But I'll try and put in photos. The music is playing and Ismail is nowhere to be seen. Like, has this guy got lost on the way? Why is the music playing? Commentary's asking him here, where the fuck is this guy? Is this mind games? Mind games for who? There's no one in the octagon. Obviously, this fucking clown Ismail is a jiu-jitsu guy. And so we're therefore supporting Takahashi here in this one, folks. It's been minutes and Ismail still hadn't arrived to the cage. He finally emerges and brings the fucking favela with him. Now, I really hope this guy loses. Why do you have 30 people for your corner? Like, both these guys have terribly translated pre-fight comments where the translation speaks over the fighters. It's just incoherent noise you can't understand. The fight starts and I can guarantee you Ismail will break his hands here. Even if he gets to throw them, he will break them. Just no wraps, just a terrible idea. Takahashi, not Takashi, opens by giving Ismail a wedgie, exposing one of the cheeks. Ismail attempts the takedown, but Takashi holds the fence. That's a constant theme here. Holding the fence, new thing that's just been banned. Well, new thing, last event. Big John at points has to pull Takahashi's hands off the cage. Like, this is just blatant cheating from this guy. Like, he's Japanese, doesn't speak English, so when Big John screams at him to let go of the fence, it just bounces off his head. He doesn't understand what he's saying. Ismail looks tired after not getting these takedowns though. They break and we come back into the centre. Takashi drops Ismail with a counter right hook. And Ismail rushes in. He hits him with like one hook. Ismail runs in. Takahashi hits him with one hook that almost stuns him before then hitting him again. Reloading. Bang, hit that shit again. Drops him. Before then just letting him back up again and then pointing to the referee as though there was supposed to be like a count or something, like he doesn't know the fucking rules. And like, for a guy that has a 50-50 record in Pancrase, Takashi has shocked me here with his movement. He's actually not bad. He's quite quick. His counter punch is really strong. Ismail just has no answers on the feet and no answers even on the ground. Takahashi gets the takedown and then just starts spamming headbutts and punches. And he just kind of rides the clock out in this dominant position. And I think he thinks the fight's over. Like, in these first round fights, you always have 3 minutes overtime. In these semi-finals, you always have 3 minutes of overtime. So a commentary seems to say, well, he does know the rules, so why the fuck is he celebrating like an idiot? But, like, that first round, it is what it is. Like, we have this jiu-jitsu guy. At least Takahashi from the top is actually landing shit, which is just these guys fucking kryptonite. They can't handle it. They come out for round 2. Ismail just looks dead on the feet. He gets dropped again by Takahashi, and Takahashi tries to kick him on the floor. This is when we get clarity on the rules from Jeff Blatnick. He says fighters wearing shoes can't kick a grounded opponent. That's why JB didn't get disqualified or a warning in the first fight, but that ends up drawing the fight to a close. Like, I don't think it was that bad. The crowd started booing. Like, you got a couple of knockdowns, some decent exchanges, some nice groundwork. I thought it was fine. Your winner by unanimous decision, Takahashi. He's through to fight Bolander in the final. Ken Shamrock will be leaving us, but he will be back for the lightweight final. So he's doing all the lightweight fights, and we have the heavyweight bracket. And wait till you see who's joining us on commentary. But we move on. Scott Ferozzo versus Jim Mullen. We have Scott Ferozzo, before he's got his own section out here, and his discipline screen says that he's ring deadly / street lethal. Some guy needs to use that as a nickname. Holy fuck, Tank Abbott is back on commentary. I never thought I would see the day. Was it UFC 9? He get bleeped and censored and cut out and edited, just a mess, but he's back. First thing he does is completely diminish the lightweight tournament. Says it's filled with kids. He's here with a big man, and he says this all with a smile as though he knows he's pissing people off saying it. Tank Abbott is just rage baiting these smaller guys. Jeff Blatnick tries to stand up for them, but this is very funny. And I will say Tank is actually surprisingly well-spoken, considering what you expect him to sound like when you look at him and when you see him fight, but he's very well-spoken. He calls Ferozzo the rotund one and says he should just go to the WWF now, but holy shit, the long boys for Ferozzo is not a flattering look on his physique. He's got a new tattoo as well. It looks like he's just gotten fatter as well. Like, he looks like Chris Barnett. He clinches Mullen against the fence and just starts kneeing him against the cage, grabs the front face lock, gets the takedown, putting all his weight on him. Ferozzo lands some body shots before standing up, kneeing Mullen in the face while he's still like seated up against the fence. I've spoken before about how well like the octagon's mic'd up, and it's too well mic'd up here. You can hear Ferozzo wheezing in there. Like, it's beyond heavy breathing. It's transitioned to wheezing. He lands more knees up against the fence. Mullen's barely even trying to get up here. When he finally gets back to his feet, he just gets picked up and dunked. Like, and the wheezing goes on. It continues. This is the heaviest breathing I've ever heard. Big John tries to check the cut on Mullen's head. He gets checked on by the doctors. He gets let back in. I have no idea what that spinning attack was that he was trying to go for. Spinning back fist? Really? In 1997, the spinning back fist? Bruce Beck says, well, Scott Ferozzo's not a poster boy, but he's through to the final. He ended up getting the TKO finish, and he is through to face the winner of our next fight. We have Vitor Belfort, the Phenom, still a teenager at this point, taking on Trey Tellingham. I can't pronounce his second name, we'll call him Trey. Bruce Beck tells us that here, this guy looks all fucked up, and just in case you're wondering, he had a car accident when he was like 1 year old, and he lost like his pectoral muscle, so his chest looks like kind of crazy. Just in case you're wondering what happened to his chest, there it is, you see, he's missing one. But apropos of nothing, we get this UFC flashback which makes us watch Chemo and Hoist Gracie again. And they are desperate to attach Hoist Gracie, or just the Gracie name, to Belfort, like not understanding that when you're associated with Gracies, it just does more damage to your perception than make people fear you. They just think you're a straight pussy. Like, we've seen the Gracie style already. Like, let Vitor handle business on his own. But we go, Vitor presses Trey against the fence, just lets the hands go. He's so fast, and like, he's so much faster than anyone we've ever seen. Knocks him down, 12-6 elbows, which Tank says are being blocked and not hurting Trey, as Trey verbally submits. And your winner by TKO, Vitor Belfort. Like, he gave up and Big John didn't hear it. Vitor is a very good sport here and stops hitting Trey. When he gave up, other people would be landing super necessary follow-up shots even after the fight's over. So it was nice from Vitor, but now commentary, and particularly Tank, is saying, yeah, this isn't a jiu-jitsu guy. He is not bitch made. Commentary seemed very impressed, and Bruce Beck plants the seeds at the desk here for a Tank and Vitor fight, something that I wouldn't mind seeing. We now get propaganda for Mark Coleman, fighting tonight for the brand new, first time ever, UFC Heavyweight Championship. This fight was originally supposed to be Frye and Dan Severn, but Frye broke his hand in the last fight at the Ultimate against Tank Abbott, so he couldn't make tonight, or he couldn't fight tonight at least. He would not be seen in the octagon ever again, as we went over in our Ultimate review. But in his place, Mark the Hammer Coleman, who says it's his goal to retire undefeated. We'll see how he gets on tonight. Joe Rogan in the back tells us Takahashi has broke his hand. Nick Sanzo will take his place in the lightweight tournament final. Sanzo beat Jackie Lee in an alternate fight in 48 seconds, and more of this jiu-jitsu bullshit. Like, you kidding me? I don't hate jiu-jitsu. I love Charles Oliveira. But he's an active grappler. He doesn't just sit there racking up bullshit control time or lying his back holding on to guard whilst being immobile. That's why I shit on jiu-jitsu so bad at this time. But the fight starts, JB with a leg kick to start again. He gets the upper hand in the clinch and uses what Shamrock calls the crucifix. Now, I don't recognise this as a crucifix. I recognise that more as like what Kamzat did to DDP. But he actually applies this crucifix, making it a choke by pulling the arms back. He's forcing Sanzo's chin to chest. So both Blatnick and Shamrock explain how this is actually a choke, and eventually you just go to sleep. So Sanzo taps. JB wins the first ever UFC lightweight tournament. Now, on to the heavyweight tournament final, Scott Frozo and Vitor Belfort. But before we get there, we get Dan Severn propaganda this time. He thinks he is going to beat Mark Coleman tonight in our main event. What else would you expect him to say? Is what I would ask. It's just sort of gym montage, really. That's kind of what the propaganda is. Nothing really too major, but we have Scott Frozo, we have Vitor Belfort. We hear from Vitor's camp there in the back with Joe Rogan. He says, or his coach, I'm presuming that this is, says that he is the Tiger Woods or the Michael Jordan of the sport of MMA. And then we see Tank Abbott back at commentary, thank God, who keeps calling Frozo the rotund one and almost tells people to just relax about Vitor, by the way. His speed isn't that impressive. His power isn't that impressive. Part of me thinks that this is just Tank being Tank and he can't actually believe this, but we'll see what he thinks after the tournament final. I can't believe they let him back on commentary after the last time. But we get Vitor out here, we get Frozo out here, the fight begins, Vitor lands a left that stuns Frozo, right? First punch of the fight. Tank Abbott was just saying, here guys, let's not overreact now. The speed isn't that impressive. The power isn't that impressive. Now, I'm not saying you need to be the fastest puncher ever, right? For Frozo, or to land on Frozo and have him just not react, okay? But Vitor then lands another punch, which then just drops the fucking over 300 pounder here. Before he can even react, he has no idea what even hit him. Vitor lands ground and pound to back of the head. Big John stops the fight in under 1 minute. Frozo stands up and tries to pick up and take down Vitor after the fight. The fight is clearly over. What the fuck is he doing? But Vitor celebrates with the entire favela. The corner's going ballistic, waving the Brazilian flags, and Tank Abbott says, what the fuck is he doing? Did the guy just win the Olympics? Can we please get Tank Abbott on commentary every event? Genuinely, any time this guy isn't fighting, can we please have him on commentary? He is tremendous. Tank says that might have been an early stoppage, or they ask him about the fight after the fact. Tank says that might have been an early stoppage, but the outcome was never in doubt. I think he fucking hates Frozo. I think that actually, annoys him so much that Frozo has a win over him, but he says it doesn't matter. The outcome was never in doubt. It doesn't matter if Big John stopped it an hour later, which I agree with. But they start asking Tank about a fight with Ken Shamrock, and he starts going off on a tangent that the cameraman behind the cameraman has to cut him off and tell him to wrap it up, and he just throws his hands up fuck it, okay, whatever. Oh man. We already know Ken Shamrock's retired. He's not coming back to fight Tank Abbott. Tank Abbott will be in a super fight though. A definite super fight at UFC 13. We'll get onto that in a little while. But Tank pieces out and Don Frye joins us here on commentary with his belts. And he says that he broke his hand against Tank Abbott in the Ultimate final. He wanted to fight for the heavyweight belt against Severn, but athletic commissions cancelled the fight in New York, and then they moved the event. We went through this whole spiel. They tried to move it to Oregon. I think they wouldn't have the fight either. We're here at Alabama, and as a result, Coleman is in the spot that Frye was originally scheduled for. So again, Don Frye will not fight in UFC again, but the way he's talking, it's as though he hasn't decided to leave yet. He says that I'd love to come back and take on the winner. That wouldn't happen in the UFC at least. But the time has arrived. We have it here for the first time, the UFC Heavyweight Championship, Severn versus Coleman. Here we go. And so the fight begins. Severn shoots in immediately on Coleman, who stuffs it. Look at this size of Mark Coleman here. I don't know what the fuck kind of steroids this guy's on. Look at this size of him. It is ridiculous. Severn tries to shoot again, and Coleman stuffs it. And the third one. Coleman is able to get the neck crank here, and Severn hangs on for a while, I suppose, before tapping out. Super anticlimactic. But I swear, I'll put in the video here. It's not even celebratory from Mark Coleman. It's pure unfiltered roid rage. This guy's like a caged animal. There are not enough trenbolone sandwiches there's not enough HGH on planet Earth to make a guy this crazy. I have no idea what he is on, but he is the winner, and he is the first UFC heavyweight champion. Don Frye on commentary says that he plans to come back in May. That wouldn't happen. Coleman also says that Don Frye is deserving of a rematch. He also says he wants to face Ken Shamrock. They float the name Tank Abbott, the fight that we should have gotten, but didn't. And then Coleman says he will fight anyone and he'll face whoever the fans want to see him face. So Mark Coleman speaks well, and he's so calm when he speaks. It's almost like he's a psychopath, because we see him just flip that switch where he goes ballistic after winning and then speaks as though like he's not even out of breath. Even though he's like drenched head to toe in all this sweat, like this guy is insane. and he's great. To be fair to him, he is great, and good for him. Another win for Mark Coleman, still undefeated. The dream goes on. But that's UFC 12. Another one in the books. This event was missing something for me personally. I think it was the star power in the tournaments. There was no former winners or runners up in the tournament. All the stars were at the fucking commentary desk. Like Don Frye, Ken Shamrock, Tank Abbott. That's your stars right there. And Severn and Coleman, sure, they're in the super fight, but it meant that the tournament suffered. I know that Vitor Belfort is a star and star-making performance tonight, but we'd never seen him before this point, so the crowd doesn't acknowledge, like, oh, holy shit, that was Vitor Belfort, and that's a shame. But, like, what, you can't expect them to be keeping up with fucking Brazilian Vale Tudo and know that this guy's insane. But Ferozo, I want to like him after that promo that he cut at the Ultimate, but he is so out of shape that it's distracting to watch. Like, I can't focus on anything else in there except the fucking overhang of his gut. It's just gnarly. It's insane for a supposed and alleged athlete, which I know is not really athletics at this point in time, but it would go on to become that. But then again, look at the fucking state of heavyweight in the big 2026, and is he really that out of place as a UFC heavyweight? Which is a shocking indictment where modern MMA is at least at heavyweight. But look, as a recap of the whole piece, Takahashi versus Ismail had a fine fight. The JB fights were what they were, nothing special. Vitor was definitely the shining light of this event over both tournaments. Like, probably the only thing I could genuinely recommend you go back and watch for being actually good. In terms of historical significance, sure, watch Coleman and Severn, but to actually be entertained, Vitor Belfort's combined, 2 minutes in the cage was almost the only worthwhile thing. What I will say is commentary, our special guests, commentary all night, Blatnick and Beck are doing a good job, but Tank, Shamrock, Frye, I would love it if when these guys aren't fighting, if they would actually come back and just be commentators, because genuinely they done that well. It was great to listen to, particularly Tank. Tank is one of my favourites, and I have a bit of a bias towards him, but I thought he was very funny. But that is it for UFC 12 Judgment Day. We have a new heavyweight champion, Mark Coleman. He will not be at UFC 13, but in his absence at UFC 13, titled Ultimate Force, we will have the super fight between Tank Abbott and Vitor Belfort. He's a star already, folks. Not only that, but we get the debut of the natural, Randy Couture, and the debut of your favourite and mine, the Huntington Beach bad boy, Tito Ortiz. Remember to like this video. Remember to subscribe to the channel to keep up with the new content as it drops. Comment your own thoughts below. Share with a friend. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all next time. So UFC 13 Ultimate Force took place on May 30th, 1997 in Augusta, Georgia. Back for the first time since UFC 11, attendance is up from 4,500 at UFC 11 to 5,100 this time around. But we open with a video package looking at our main event, Power and Will versus Speed and Skill, Tank Abbott versus Vitor Belfort. I am looking forward to this one. We have a heavyweight tournament and a lightweight tournament. No names announced for either tournament, but we'll find out what's up as we go. We come out of the video package to Augusta, Georgia, and thankfully, unlike last time, we do not talk about the cotton exchange. We ended up actually hitting most of the other highlights that we already visited though, which makes me think that someone at UFC probably went, oh, maybe we shouldn't talk about that. But we are back at the Augusta Civic Centre. Bruce Beck and Jeff Blatnick on the call tonight. They run down the main event. They paint Tank Abbott as the heel and Vitor as the face, which I suppose is understandable, but then we run down the tournament. Now we have somebody in here we've seen before, Christoph Leninger. I'm sure we've seen him. I recognise the name. He faced Ken Shamrock at UFC 3. He's back and he's against Guy Mezger, who has been an alternate before at UFC 4 and 5, but never in an official tournament. We also have Inoue versus Algar. We haven't seen either of them before. Inoue has some Vale Tudo experience. Algar actually has a pretty successful wrestling career. NCAA D1 gold medalist, silver at World Championships. Not half bad. In the heavyweight tournament, 4 newcomers. I'm sure you will recognise one name. We have Stepanov versus Graham. Commentary says we know literally nothing about them. So let's just all find out together, I suppose. We then have Randy Couture against Tony Halme. He's Finnish, and some wrestling fans, some WWE fans, might know the name Ludwig Borga from the 90s. Renowned homophobe. He went as far as to tattoo exit only on his own ass cheeks. So that's the kind of level that we're dealing with here. Joe Rogan's back. He tells us, he lets us know what the updates are as we need them. Lightweight alternate bout, Tito Ortiz is the winner. He beat Wes Alberton with a plethora of elbows, as Bruce Beck put it. I like that a lot. And heavyweight alternate Nielsen beat Husseini. We go over the rules of the octagon, ways to win as always. And then we go to our first fight. But before we get there, now, I don't know if you'll have seen this before, but UFC have planted signs in the crowd here, okay? I don't know if I've put them in the videos before, but they've got planted models to diversify the crowd, planted signs, all that stuff. They hand them out before the event, and this one says Shamrock is a sellout written on it, which is kind of bullshit from UFC. Shamrock was one of your biggest stars who made you a whole lot of money, and as part of his WWE deal is getting UFC promotion in front of millions of people that are watching WWE. So fuck UFC for that, by the way. Like, if I was Shamrock, I would be taking the UFC promo out of the contract after that shit. Whoever done that, I might not have liked a lot of Shamrock's fights, but he meant a lot to early UFC and therefore the sport of MMA as a result. And that's how you treat him on the way out, man. Like, fuck you. Like, Bruce Buffer's back. They introduced Mezger and Leninger, and these lines then, guys, like, they even look like Ken Shamrock, man. We can't escape them. Mezger, I actually like. He's the only person to actually grab the opponent's gi and start pummeling him. So Mezger already has points from me. Like, how can this guy be Lions then when we've seen Shamrock and Bolander have such boring fights and this guy is actually about it? But a lot of gayness from these jiu-jitsu guys. And Leninger's not even jiu-jitsu, he's just out here in the gi. I think he's judo. But, like, he's doing his very best to put his hands down Mezger's trunks. Like, he won't let go. Like, he's trying to get a look at his dick. They go to the ground before Mezger stands back up. Mezger lands some kicks, some headbutts, some knees. Really mixing up his offense here, diversifying his portfolio on the feet. And Leninger will not let go of Mezger's dick. Like, this is beyond gay from Leninger. If I was Mezger, I would be filing some sort of, assault charge, maybe some kind of essay against Leninger. Like, how is this allowed? Like, he's basically cupping the balls at this point. We get a nice roll from Leninger, which lands him in mount before Mezger's able to reverse it. Quite a nice sequence. But good lord, when we make it to the guard, these lines then, guys, they never leave. The motif on the wall, we said it before. You get to guard, you never pass the guard. We never leave the guard. Thankfully, Big John eventually stands them up. Mezger actually using leg kicks, reminiscent of Marco Huas. Where did he go, by the way? He just came in, rocked our world and left. But a nice high kick from Mezger lands. Some more kicks land with success. Leninger looks really tired here, but the fight kind of starts to slow down towards the end of regulation. And we close out regulation on the ground. Mezger on top, who definitely has won the fight so far. All he has to do is close this out. We go to overtime. The crowd boo. I don't think that's really fair, but we do need to remember at this point in early UFC, we've kind of become accustomed to quick finishes. Like, fights only really go the distance in super fights, really, or, you know, high level, between the top names, the big stars. So seeing these guys in the first round go all the way is kind of a rarity, so they're probably expecting finishes, and that's why they're booing. But we go to overtime, whole lot of nothing. Leninger cannot stop grabbing Mezger's trunks, and he's not even grabbing the waist region. Like, he's grabbing the dick and ball region of his trunks. Thankfully, Mezger has on like 2 pairs, which, okay, cool, whatever. But this is finally over. Mezger does a fine job. Sadly, he's in there with someone who didn't want to fight and isn't very good. But Mezger wins by unanimous decision. He makes it to the final of the lightweight tournament. And what I will say about Mezger is, like, at this point, for what we've seen, like, pretty well-rounded. I think he was originally a kickboxer, but obviously his training at Lionsden means that his grappling's kind of... I mean, look, you don't really need to be a master grappler at this point. As soon as you come in here against a guy that only does stand-up, you've got the beating of him. But, he's pretty well-rounded. His grappling's decent, having been in there with Shamrock. And, yeah, throw that in with the mix of kicks, the use of headbutts. Mezger's pretty good, and strong contender for this tournament. He really could storm it in the final, but we'll just need to wait and see. In our second semi-final, we have Inoue versus Alger. Alger has Mark Coleman in his corner, and Bruce Beck says that Coleman is the only undefeated fighter with 5 or more fights. And now, he is correct, right? But technically speaking, Royce Gracie throwing in the towel against Harold Howard was never counted as a loss. It should have done. It should have counted as a loss to me. As soon as you make the walk and step into the cage, you're there. You've made the walk, you're ready to go, and you throw that towel in, that is a loss. But it wasn't actually counted as a loss. So technically, according to some people, not me, I agree with Bruce, but according to some people, look, you and me know the truth, but Royce Gracie at this point is also undefeated in UFC and has more than 5 fights, and I don't like that, right? I don't like that, but yeah, his only non-win was a draw against Shamrock, which again, he lost, but we didn't have the judges. If we had the judges, Shamrock would have won. But out comes Coleman here behind Alger, who is all fired up like he's dipped into a special bag or something. Alger shoots, and his battery must have died halfway through because he ends up on the floor before even reaching Inoue, so his shoot is almost like a crawl on the floor to Inoue's feet. They struggle for a moment before Alger ends up on top into half guard. It looks like he's trying for like the Homer Simpson style double-handed throttle choke instead of just throwing hands, but Inoue grabs the arms, gets a nice armbar in there, and the fight is over. Alger taps, which I was shocked at, because I thought when I seen Coleman come out behind Alger, I thought this is wraps, this is like Alger's gonna go on and win this thing, but no, taps out, and it looks like his arm might have been hyperextended, like he's holding it very strangely as though it is actually injured, and it's completely irrelevant anyway because Inoue has made it to the final. He says in his post-fight interview he feels good, he's going to lie down and he's going to let the adrenaline wear off. All I'm saying is, we know who won, that alternate lightweight fight. So we'll see if Inoue can make it to the final. We then get Propaganda, which would become somewhat of a regular fixture here tonight and moving onward. But we get Tank Abbott Propaganda, where we run through his entire UFC run. They show him literally punching a guy in the crowd at UFC 8. And that must be the brawling by him on that Bruce Beck was talking about. I thought it was to do with the bar fights that he kept mentioning on commentary, but apparently not. He punched someone in the crowd, and that's what got him suspended. But turns out it wasn't just any guy that he punched. It was a man called Alan Goes, who was a Brazilian fighter. He trains with Vitor Belfort, or he's like his coach. So that adds a personal element to this super fight and some animosity that I wish we knew about before the pay-per-view. Now I get it. Look, I'm reviewing this fucking 30 years after the fact, right? But we teased this Vitor Belfort Tank Abbott fight at our last event. I wish they'd mentioned that. I wish they'd mentioned that there was this personal animosity between them, because Tank, I say attacked, right? Tank, he thinks he's justified in what he done. But, you know what I mean? They've already had a fight. I feel as though that would have been perfect way to build up this fight, but not to worry. In that video, they actually show the Don Frye fight again, and I cannot believe that Tank didn't win that. What a chin on Don Frye. Genuinely, if Tank wins that fight, he would then have fought Dan Severn for the heavyweight title. And then who knows what happens. The first heavyweight champion could have been Tank Abbott. I doubt it, but it could have been. Moving onwards, we have Stepanov versus Graham. Stepanov is the Russian Special Forces military hand-to-hand Russian champion from Minsk in Belarus. So I don't want to get into any of the politics here because I don't understand it and don't even really want to be honest. Graham starts off hot, charges across the octagon, gets the takedown on Stepanov with a big slam into half guard, and then into side control looking for the key lock. He gets it. Stepanov taps, nasty arm lock here. Impressive from Stephen Graham. How is this guy 23 years old? Fucking look at the size of this guy. But he has a nice interview with Joe Rogan after the fact. So nice win for Graham. Good for him. And he makes it to the heavyweight final. Next up, we have Randy Couture versus Tony Halme. And we're just going to get straight into this one as well because fuck it, why not? Halme lands. I'm going to get mixed up with the Halme and the Halme. It's just one of these things. He loads up, charges straight across the octagon before he can even throw. Couture meets him, gets the takedown with a double leg. And I think Halme has been dipping into the bag of whatever Mark Coleman is on. Because when he's down here, right? And I'm not talking about whatever uppers that Coleman was on to get himself hyped up. Maybe the smelling salts, whatever, right? I'm talking about his special bag that gives him all the big muscles, right? Because when he's on the ground here, he has veins on his shin popping. I've never seen anything fucking like this before. Popping shin veins. Couture's able to get the back and the choke. He wins by submission in a minute. He faces Steve Graham in the final of the heavyweight tournament. Nice win for Couture. Then again, if you know the name Randy Couture and you know what he would become, you expected this. But at the time, in a debut performance, he done really well. We get another UFC flashback. Now, we got these at our last event and they're going to start doing this and keep them coming. I'm not a fan. It just feels like filler, like they're stalling. And it's like there's no need. We've had all these events where we've just kept it rolling, kept the action moving. I don't like that we're getting into this constant video package here, there and everywhere. It feels a lot like UFC 2, which is not a good thing. It was the worst event UFC's ever done. But we see Marco Huas beat Paul Varlins with the leg kicks, and he's still the only guy to really use the leg kicks. We've seen Mesger tonight use them intermittently, but not like Huas. We then get more propaganda just strictly for the boys from Brazil, looking at Royce Gracie and the next top Brazilian, king of the streets, Marco Huas. And then Bruce Beck describes this as the next generation of Brazilian fighter, Vitor Belfort. And the UFC love these Brazilians. I feel like even here they put Brazil at like the top of the food chain when it comes to nationality of fighters. They put more focus on Brazil than they do even Americans, even though we've had a lot of American winners and a lot of American champions. But after that, we end up getting the Vitor Belfort propaganda just back to back to back. Here it is exhausting. And I get stalling for time, but why not just do what we used to do and put the super fight on here and then have the tournament finals at the end of the night? Because this is a lot of promo videos. Again, back to back to back. Draining. Al Stanky now talking about Vitor and keeps calling him Victor. So there's that. But finally, mercifully, we end the propaganda. We get to the lightweight tournament final. No, we don't. Joe Rogan comes in, another update. Inouye's out, he's injured. He had a problem with his eye, he can't see. And Tito Ortiz as an alternate. He won his fight in 30 seconds. And we get more of this promo shit. Can we please get to the fight? They then show us the full All-Britain Tito Ortiz fight with entrances. What the fuck are we doing here? Can we get to the final? You already told us who wins. Why do we need to watch this? See, if this fight was 10 minutes and we already know who won, like, would they have just played the whole fucking thing? Like, this actually annoyed me having to sit here and watch this. But, look, here's Tito Ortiz before the CTE, before he had his memory card wiped by Chuck Liddell, before he had kids that he wanted to outlive. Like, he's a street fighter, that's what he's calling himself. We've seen him at UFC 11 cornering Tank Abbott, so that's his mentor. And look, Tito, again, smashes this guy 30 seconds. Let's not waste any more time than we have to here. We get to the final, finally. We get Tito Ortiz versus Guy Mezger. I'm actually looking forward to this fight. Now, we know what Tito Ortiz would become in the future, but Mezger right now is pretty good. Really good pancreas record. He would then later go on to fight in Pride, a little more patchy there, but for right now, for a Lions Den guy, who you'd assume would be quite boring, he is actually pretty decent with a pretty diverse game, especially compared to Bolander and Shamrock. Frank Shamrock is in the corner of Guy Mezger tonight, and the fight begins. They start standing. Tito just starts swinging like a lunatic here. Mezger ends up just shooting on him. He doesn't want any part of that. Tito ends up sprawling on Mezger and knees Mezger from the top to the head before he tries an inside cradle to transition. And it sure looks like Mezger taps here, but and commentary's kind of freaking out. They're like, was that a tap there from Mezger? But Bruce is going ballistic on commentary. Jeff Blanick agrees. He says it sure looked like it did. But Big John stands this up. Tito Ortiz thinks that he's won, which he thinks the fight's stopped. But Big John's just stopping it to check the cut on Mezger's head. He addresses the potential tap. Big John says that Guy Mezger was not tapping. It was an attempted block. And Tito must have said to Big John, like, here, he tapped out, but Big John was having none of that and said that it was an attempted block, so that is what it is. Now, Tito really had the advantage here, and it looked like he was going to win the fight, but we get stood back up. We're now restarting the fight back in the centre. They start throwing again, then Tito shoots on Mezger this time, sort of apropos of nothing. He didn't have to do it, he chose to, and he get countered, he get thrown into a guillotine, and had to tap out, and he was fucking pissed off. But there you have it. Guy Mezger wins the lightweight tournament. That's 2 Lions Den guys in a row. Jerry Bolander, Guy Mezger winning the lightweight tournaments. And I might not like the Lions Den style, but it is clearly effective. And Guy Mezger is probably my favourite out of the lot. So I'm a Guy Mezger guy, so I'm okay with this. Tito gets up here again, pissed off. He still accepts the hug from Mezger, but you can tell he is angry. And I would be as well, to be fair. I understand that we need to like check the cut and stuff like that, particularly at this point where you're getting a lot of heat from the Athletic Commission, but Tito had the position on Mezger on the ground. It looked close to over, and the fight then has to get reset back on the feet when Big John breaks it. So I understand the frustration from Tito. He might not even have been pissed about that. He might just have been pissed about getting caught in the galley, but Mesger gets the win. I'm sure Tito will be back. I'm sure he'll be able to carve out a career for himself, and I think he'll do okay for himself in the future of MMA. We get another Tank Abbott promo and highlights of the previous heavyweight fights before we get to our heavyweight tournament final. Steve Graham, Randy Couture. Couture starts off shooting for the double leg. He gets it, transitioning between side control from right to left via north-south. Like, he's just running amok, running rings literally around Graham on the floor. Couture goes for the rear naked choke. He can't get it the first time. Graham does well to escape, to be fair, but Couture stays on top. We're moving really quick here, and it's nice to see actual athletic heavyweights who can go, and these guys are big. They are very heavy, but they can actually move, which is nice. Couture's inside control before sprawling on top of Graham, lands some knees to the head from the top. Big John almost steps in. He does his best Joe Rogan impression, telling Graham to get out of there, before Couture takes the back, gets the hooks in, and I thought he was going to go for the choke here and get it, but instead chooses to land ground and pound to the back of the head. Big John then steps in, and there you have it. Randy Couture has won his first heavyweight tournament at the first time of asking. So there you go, a star is born. Randy Couture, the first of many victories for Randy Couture. But there you have it. That's your lightweight winner, Guy Mesger, your heavyweight winner, Randy Couture. We get another flashback of Tank Abbott beating Cal Worsham at the Ultimate 96. We then get a flashback, well, they conveniently leave out the ending, by the way, with the punch after the bell after the break. We then get the flashback of Vitor's last two fights at UFC 12, and after what feels like an eternity, we finally get to the main event. The fight we have really been waiting for. Tank Abbott versus Vitor Belfort. They call this the super fight. We have the pre-fight comments, but at this point, I just didn't even care what they were talking about. We've had to sit through so much filler bullshit to get to this point, so let's just get to the action, please. The fight starts. They have been building to this stand and bang contest through all of these videos. So when the fight starts and Vitor shoots immediately and just charges it, Tank tries to body lock and take him down. Oh my god, like, I was frustrated, to say the least. Tank is able to get back up, and he just gets Vitor back on the feet. He doesn't want to go on the ground. Like, get the fuck up. This is what we've been selling this entire time, so respect to Tank Abbott for that. He wants to throw. So does Vitor, to be fair, when he gets on the feet. I don't know why he shot like that, like why he just lunged forward into that takedown attempt, but look, Tank Abbott wanted it on the feet, and be careful what you wish for. Vitor shows that speed and power, knocks down Tank Abbott, lands some good ground and pound, and Vitor finishes the fight, and for the first time ever, Tank Abbott actually gives some respect and some credit to his opponent, shaking his hand and giving him a hug. Now, these fights here, this fight in particular, was billed as a super fight, even though there isn't a title on the line. There is no more super fight title. And I was thinking about ranking all of these super fights, but I'll need to have a look and see what actually qualifies and what was actually named as a super fight. I think we might have another one coming, so we'll wait and see before we do that ranking. But look, Vitor gets the win. You would need to think this would put him in line for a heavyweight title fight, because he's won a tournament, he's won a super fight. Again, against Tank Abbott, who isn't exactly top of the chain, but seeing as Don Frye's gone, Shamrock's gone, Severn isn't going to fight here again, like, we have a sort of vacuum at the top where we need someone to step up, and Tank Abbott is the biggest star at this point. But this was one of the first events, just to recap here, this was one of the events where I'm watching it and thinking half of this could have been cut. Like, it felt like it was so heavy on filler content and just bullshit promo after promo. We could have cut an hour off of this. And something that I've like taken granted for in previous UFC events is the sort of conveyor belt system that they have to keep the action moving. So you can actually, at previous events, you can tell when they're stalling, because which like is a testament to how good they were at keeping it going, that when there was a long-ish break, you can actually tell like, oh, something must be wrong, we must be looking for an alternate, something's actually happening. But here it's just like long drawn out breaks, stalling just for the sake of stalling, and it's like there's just so much bullshit. Like, I get the fight we came to see is a super fight, right? So you want that to main event. But if people have already sat through the tournament, they won't leave before the finals, even if they only came to see the super fight. If they've sat through the rest of the tournament, they'll watch the last two finals if that's the reason why the super fight must go on last. But the super fight, as we used to do it, putting it on before the tournament finals, would then in turn keep the action moving, even if the fight wasn't filled with action, but at least you're watching something. And this could have been done in an hour and a half, 2 hours, instead of 2.5 hours. And I understand the concept of like value for money, and we need to give them something for their time. I value my time more than the $50 that it would have cost me to buy the pay-per-view if I had more fun actually watching it with all the action condensed into an hour and a half, 2 hours, instead of this 2.5 hour fucking event. But of the actual content, the actual fucking meat on the bone of the event, it wasn't bad. Guy Mezger was impressive, so was Randy Couture. In terms of the actual action of the fight, none of these are really worth going back to watch. There is no banger. Even the super fight, having next to no action, Vitor just took over and smashed Tank, so it wasn't even really the brawl that we were sold. But you can't always deliver on what you think a fight will be. Sometimes it just goes another way, so I'm not angry about the outcome of the fight, but it just was a bit of a letdown considering what you had in your mind it could have been. Neither Vitor or Tank will be at our next event at UFC 14 titled showdown, nor will Randy Couture or Guy Mezger or Tito Ortiz. But not to worry, because we have Mark Coleman defending his heavyweight championship for the first time, and not against the winner of the heavyweight tournament, not against the winner of the super fight, not even against a big name like a Frye, Shamrock. He's taking on Maurice Smith. So this should be an easy one for the champ, shouldn't it? Shouldn't it? He's a really good kickboxer, guys. I don't know about this. Should be a real easy one for the champ, guys. Shouldn't it be? We will see at UFC 14. Got that alongside the debut of the Smashing Machine, Mark Kerr. So like this video, comment your own thoughts below, hit the subscribe button and the notify bell to stay up with the content as it drops, and I will see you all next time. So UFC 14 Showdown took place on July 27th, 1997, and it's another one for Birmingham, Alabama. This is one of the only places that we can actually get the UFC sanctioned in 1997. This time we're at the Boutwell Auditorium, not the Fair Park Arena, and we can literally only have UFC cards in the South. The last events have literally only been in either Alabama or Georgia. We are in deep shit as a promotion at this point. But we open up with a video package where we promo Maurice Smith and Mark Coleman. We then run some propaganda for the state of Alabama. Nothing you haven't seen before. They run out of stuff to say when they visit the same places every single time. But we come out of that. We come out to the arena sold out. 4,800 people in attendance. A nice quote from Bear here. And we see Bruce Beck at the desk, who runs down the best main event we have ever seen in UFC. And he says that this is the ultimate striker versus grappler matchup, which, as it happens, is the sort of essence of what UFC was originally. Guys were specialising in a discipline and proving that their discipline was superior to the opponent. We've sort of lost that along the way, like where in modern day UFC every athlete just trains everything. So, but that's a story for another time. off the soapbox, I suppose. Jeff Blatnick joins us at the desk here in a matching shirt. I wonder if this was coordinated, or they both just enjoy Ralph Lauren and neither bought a spare shirt. That's just, like, it makes me think it must be roasting in the arena, because these guys are normally in suits, so they must have complained about that and they said, right, okay, just wear the polo shirts. But Jeff Blatnick talks about our competitors, special focus on Mark Kerr. That might happen, by the way, here. That getting Kerr and Coleman confused might not be the only time it happens, but some may know him as the Smashing Machine. We have a name change here, as the lightweight tournament has been renamed to the middleweight tournament. The limits are still the same, under 199 for middleweight and over 200 for heavyweight. And fuck me, Joe Moreira's back. You'll remember he engaged in a non-contact fight with Paul Varlins at UFC 8. And Joe Rogan is here saying that everyone is excited about the debuting wrestlers Kerr and Kevin Jackson, and then just lies when he says that everybody's looking forward to the return of Joe Moreira. We are not, okay? We are not looking forward to the return of Joe Moreira. We run through the rules, as always, the ways to win, and fucking hell, we need to watch this guy first. Oh boy. No respite for this bullshit. He takes on, oh my god, Yuri Volin, sorry, an alleged grappler who trains in boxing shorts and throws hands, okay? I'm not even asking questions. They then pull up his name that calls him a boxer. I'll just assume that Bruce Beck misspoke when he called him a grappler. Then Jeff Blatnick says this guy has absolutely no ground skill whatsoever. Believe me, we will see it. So here comes Joe Moreira, jiu-jitsu guy, obviously a straight pussy. So you know how this goes. Like, the reason he couldn't take down Varlins is because he's so big, and instead he just chose to like circle round Varlins and make no contact. So now these guys are the same size. I'm willing to bet how this goes. Moreira is going to take him down, lie on top for 15. This is going straight to decision. Bruce Buffer does the intros, says this guy's fighting out of Huntington Beach, California. No, he fucking isn't, okay? Huntington Beach is the home of Tank Abbott, T. Ortiz, and Chemo, legends of the game. Huntington Beach has to be protected and reserved for these types of great warriors. No access for the likes of a Joe Moreira who circles making no contact, completely bitch made. Fuck this guy, okay? And what do you know, the fight starts, Joe Moreira circles, then shoots, gets the takedown on this guy with absolutely no ground skills. Moreira's in mount, makes no attempt to create distance and land shots. He's actually holding on to Yuri on the bottom. This guy is such a pussy. The crowd start booing, and at this point the audio is all fucked up because the crowd goes from booing to silent. They turn up to a cheer before then going back to silent, all in the space of a few seconds. I have no idea what's going on with that. The crowd then starts booing again, and this time Bruce Beck has to acknowledge it, saying, well, this is just Joe Moreira's game, and I don't know why people are booing. And this is the kind of shit that makes me hate commentary. Like, this was the problem when Hoist Gracie was here, because they can't just say what's in front of them and be honest when this shit is shit, because everyone's booing because this guy hasn't even tried to move for a finish the entire fight. I don't actually believe this, but I might do a video talking about the history of like the name MMA and its impact on UFC, and it almost being the sole reason for its existence and its ability to get sanctioned and hold events. I might put that in a video of its own. For the first time in UFC history, the phrase mixed martial arts has just been used in this absolute dumpster fire matchup. MMA history was made in this fucking shit show of a fight. Blatnick says, talking about Yuri here, this man has 273 boxing matches. He's an incredible boxer, but it's not enough in a mixed martial arts competition. So there's some history for you folks, and it's in the middle of this fucking fight between these two, man. I can't believe it. We're nearly 10 minutes into this thing. Big John finally stands these two up with 2 minutes left of the round. Jesus Christ. Back up, back down. Did I not bet that this would happen? Like, Joe Moreira is a disgrace to the sport, a disgrace to his family, a disgrace to his country. Vitor Belfort is trying to fix the damage done to the Brazilian reputation that people like you and Royce Gracie have done. Ruas tried his best, but he's gone already. Vitor is seemingly our only hope for the country of Brazil. And at least he can look himself in the mirror when he gets up in the morning, because he's not doing this shit. They restart for overtime. And the crowd boo, by the way, for the restart. They don't want to see any more of this. And I'll just say now, this is the first event. Seeing as we've got time here, that nothing else is happening, I'll say this. This is the first time where all the fighters are actually required to wear the traditional MMA gloves. So there's a historic note for this event. Not that these two use them. But anyways. Fuck this fight. Fuck Joe Moreira. He wins unanimous decision. And I hope he pays for it every single day of his life. Over half an hour into this thing. And there's only one fight. Only one fight. I am about to go elbow to wrist on this thing already. Jesus fucking hell. What would become a regular feature throughout the night, and at least at our last event at UFC 13, but particularly tonight at UFC 14, stalling. A whole lot of nothing happening in between these fights. So long breaks are anticipated between every single matchup. But we gear up for our second middleweight semi-final, Todd Butler versus Kevin Jackson. Kevin Jackson is an Olympic gold medalist, multiple-time world champion. You name it, he's done it. Very good wrestler. And he's up against Todd Butler. So Kevin Jackson with pretty interesting shorts here, like fucking bicycle short length, but like half and half design. But not like traditional half and half. Like I don't even know what, you can see them yourself, they're coming up in a second, but interesting shorts from Kevin Jackson. The fight starts, Kevin looks very upright, like he's got a fucking pole shoved up his arse. They clinch against the fence. Kevin Jackson gets the takedown, takes the back, lands some very powerful punches to the back of the head, immediate concussion. And Jackson daps him up on the way to the middleweight final. Good for him. Very impressive victory here from Jackson. He has a nice interview with Joe Rogan after the fact as well. Shout out to the family back in Arizona. And like Olympic gold medalist, I feel like we've seen this with Mark Schultz. Was it Mark Schultz? See when you get these Olympians in here, just very, very dominant wrestlers, because nobody else really has that level in their discipline. To like, we've seen karate guys, we've seen judo, like nobody anywhere near Olympic level. The only Olympic level fighters we've had are the wrestlers. They come in, they always just kill it, just destroy their opponent, which, I mean, look, fair enough. But we then get to see Mark Coleman in the back, because again, we can't just go from fight to fight. We need to actually stall and drag this thing out for as long as humanly possible. We have the same amount of fights we used to. We still have, if you just take the two tournaments, merge them into one, we still start with 8 guys who then need to like break that down into then the remaining 4 people with no final. Look at this guy right here in the brown suit on the left. This guy is like the fucking original Ali Abdulaziz. I swear to God, he is everybody's manager. How fucking fat are this guy's pockets ripping off all these fighters? I don't get it. But back to what I was saying, how are these events so much longer than the original ones, even though there's one less fight on all the cards? Like, okay, you ram it with filler to take it to 2 hours. Why do you need to add on the extra half hour where nothing is happening? And I'll actually come on to this point multiple times throughout the video, but at one point in particular, it genuinely pisses me off. But we get Maurice Smith's propaganda basically running through his workout, and then shows him fucking people up basically, and then him on UFC commentary, which we never actually seen before. I don't know how they get these clips, like if we never see it, because the arena's like still full, so I don't get that. But Smith says Coleman's one-dimensional. Smith says he'll stand with Coleman or wrestle with him. It doesn't really matter. But we've made it to the heavyweight tournament, where the smashing machine Mark Kerr takes on Steiny, we'll just call him, because I don't want to get into the Stein-Steen type thing. I don't get it. We'll just call him Steiny. who we've seen being beaten by Mark Coleman before, so we'll decide to give him to Mark Coleman's friend, Mark Kerr. So Kerr makes his pre-fight comments where he contrasts and compares flashlights and laser beams before we then make it to the octagon. Commentary reference his nickname, the Smashing Machine, from his Vale Tudo days in Brazil, where he beat some guys that we've seen before. Paul Varlins, who's alright, and Fabio Gurgel, who is shit. So we'll see what happens here. Fight starts. Kerr has been dipping into the steroid bag of Mark Coleman by the looks of it, but I'm sure you'll already know. I feel like after Smash Machine came out in the Joe Rogan interview, Lionel Rivera done a documentary style video on him as well. People are probably familiar with the story of Mark Kerr and the steroid use, so I'll just leave it alone for the time being. Coleman gets the takedown and literally smashes Steiny to a finish. They hug and shake. Mark Kerr has made it to the heavyweight tournament final. A nice out-of-breath interview with Joe Rogan before Joe tells us that Joe Moreira is out of the middleweight final. Thank God. My prayers have been answered. We will have to go to an alternate. See that right there? That right there is the first part of paying every day for it, folks. Boom. That performance merited the concussion that Joe Moreira had. I don't know how he got it. I don't even care how he got it. He got it, and just get him out of this company and never let him back in. And so Strickland beat Chappelle in the middleweight alternate matchup. I don't know why we aren't moving matchup into another matchup like we used to at the previous events. I said this at the end of the last review, UFC 13. I've already spoke about it in this video. Filling the card up with just so much promo bullshit you don't care about. I have looked up the times for the fights here, right? And this is moving ahead. This is in every single televised match that get put out on here, 45 minutes of televised fights. This show is 2.5 hours long. That is fucking outrageous. You do the math on how much pointless shit is getting stuffed into this thing. Next up, we have Brian Johnson returning, kind of 50-50-ish record. He's taking on Dan Bobish. And Brian Johnson is back. They tell us that he's only lost to the best in UFC, which is true. But then again, who did he ever really beat? And I get that, he's not the worst guy ever, but the talent is starting to get a little bit more, maybe not better is the word, more consistent. There's not so much pure dreck of dreck, never trained before. But they're, again, Brian Johnson, who did he ever beat? There comes a point where you need to, start seeing a guy win. They start off swinging uncontrollably. This looks a little like a bar fight before Bobish rocks Johnson with some hands before it's just knocking down Johnson against the fence. And all you hear at this point from Bobish's corner, did I say knockdown? I meant takedown, sorry. All you hear from Bobish's corner here after the takedown, after he rocked him on the feet, hit him hard, is keep your position, Dan. This is the kind of shit we need to rid from the sport. And I get it, this is a 30 plus year review, but you start researching Bobish and realise that he's teammates with Severn and Shamrock. So this actually makes a lot of sense why the corner would be screaming some bullshit like that. There was some sort of choke, neck crank against the cage here. This fight was shit. I can't dress this up any other way. The corner literally pissed me off so much because he had Johnson up against the fence, dead to rights, hurt him on the feet, had him stuffed up against the cage, just beating him. And instead of finishing the fight, instead of going for that, they're screaming at him, hold your position, hold your position. This guy's already been finished on the ground every single time he's fought. Again, we ran through the list Severn, Coleman, who else the fuck beat Johnson? It doesn't matter at this point, but I hate that people are like this, where the finish is right there for you and you just don't take it. Absolutely infuriating. He does get it done, but almost out of oh, I just so happened to trip, stumble, and fall into the finish. I didn't actually truly go for it. I just pressed him up against the cage and Johnson just fucking gave up. Again, absolutely infuriating. We get the UFC flashback, Coleman versus Frye, which was a good fight, and then even more propaganda for Mark Coleman. I'm not even watching these anymore. This is fucking ridiculous. Telling us shit we can see with our own eyes just to stall and fill time. They are literally using clips from the same interview he had before the Dan Severn fight 2 events ago. Fucking rotten. Fit your highlights and clips in at the start in that video package, not here. Keep moving with the action. Joe Moreira has an interview where he says the doctor told him he can't fight, which is true. Moreira tells us he feels fine, which might also be true. He says he doesn't even feel concussed, just that he's regularly just dumb as fuck. But he wants to fight, which might be true. But he says that he can't fight, which again is true. And I would genuinely love to live in a world where UFC saw that absolute disgrace of a fight and told the doctor, you are giving this guy a concussion and telling him he can't fight. I don't give a fuck if he's healthy. If he can go, he's not going. And we are not watching that piece of shit ever again. So we then see the alternate bout where Strickland beats Chappelle. And if you think I'm watching this, why don't you go fuck yourself? Strickland wins with a choke, hits him after the bell, steps on him on the way up. This guy's a pussy. I hope he gets smoked. But see, whilst this happens on the screen, and this is what I'm actually, the point of this is and what I'm getting at, this is filled up with so much filler for the person at home watching it. You need to remember, right, 45 minutes of action in a 2.5 hour event. The audience is in the arena this whole time. All of them have to sit there in the dark with their thumbs up their arse whilst they stockpile a load of filler into these shows of stuff that we've already seen. Whilst nothing is happening in front of the actual audience that paid for a ticket to be there, they're sitting in the dark for nearly 2 full hours, with nothing happening. Disgraceful. Finally, we get to the middleweight final. Strickland versus Jackson. Strickland comes out. Finally, just about we get there, in a De Pasquale shirt. De Pasquale's a judge. How can you be at the judge's training school or the fucking fight camp where the judge is the fucking namesake and be at this event fighting where the coach is the judge? Mate, fuck this guy, fuck Strickland. Thank God when the fight starts, Jackson instantly gets the takedown and the back, similarly to the first fight. He goes between the choke and strikes, back to the choke, and he gets the win. Strickland taps, which is hilarious, and all of Team Jackson celebrate on top of Strickland in Strickland's corner, which is also hilarious and thoroughly deserved. Jackson says that he wants to fight the toughest middleweights, which he will. We'll get there. And he then names Joe Moreira. Those two things, the toughest middleweights and Joe Moreira, are not the same. He also names Guy Mezger, and whilst that fight would not happen, he would fight one of his Lions Den teammates, Jerry Bolander, later down the road. He gets his medal from Art Davey, the commissioner, and Bob Marowitz, the owner, says some nice things about him, and they move on. But I will say this, Kevin Jackson speaks very well, and yeah, good for him. Nice win. Impressive, very impressive. So we leave that fight and we go to, you guessed it, more propaganda after we hit up the commentary desk, of course, because we need to rip this thing for all that it's worth. So we then get the propaganda video looking at all the wrestlers in UFC. We're literally making these videos about fucking anything. We had one at the last event saying the boys from Brazil. The fuck are we doing here? After that, we then get highlights from shit we've already seen on this event. We've sat here this entire time. We've seen everything. Why? In the context of 1997, we bought the pay-per-view already. Why are we watching highlights of the stuff that we just watched? We've seen all of this. Infuriating. Again, just not great. Not great. Onward. Mark Kerr versus Dan Bobish. Before the fight, we introduced some Kazakhstani guy. I'm not even going to try and pronounce his name. Bruce Buffer announces it in an echoey building. They didn't actually put up a graphic for him or give me like a name to read. It was literally just Bruce Buffer, screaming his name into the mic in a echoey building. But he said that we hope to bring the UFC to Kazakhstan. Now, there's a trivia question for you. How long was it before they managed that one? So the fight begins. Coleman has a few leg kicks before taking down Bobish. They talk about Bobish almost being an NFL athlete. So these are two big guys, but athletic big guys. And that's very refreshing considering what we have to watch in modern day heavyweight. But Kerr switches from side control to mount. Kerr actually gets the choke here and the win. The smashing machine graduate of the Hammer House wins his very first heavyweight tournament. And as Mark Kerr flexes his freakish physique, Jeff Blatnick with possibly quote of the night, and I include mentioning mixed martial arts for the first time, this is quote of the night. Jeff Blatnick says he's a monster. He's really physically developed into a solid 250 pounder. And now tell me, Jeff, how did he manage that? The totally natty Mark Kerr develops into a solid 250 pounder. How did he do that, Jeff? I wonder. The mind boggles. Joe Rogan interviews Mark Kerr, who speaks very well. Again, he's barely out of breath in this interview, which, I mean, is strange, but he is genuinely, soft-spoken, respectful. You just don't imagine that looking at this guy just because of how fucking massive he is. But it's the same thing with Mark Coleman when he gets interviewed. I've spoke about this before as well. Don Frye, even Tank Abbott, Chemo, Goodridge, Severn, Shamrock, all these guys, what is up with that? Why are all these guys who are absolute killers whilst being the most polite and well-mannered people when they speak? I don't understand. We then run down heavyweight rankings, by the way, next. We don't go to the fight, of course. We run down heavyweight rankings. They're still holding out hope that Don Frye will return to the octagon. This event is in July. They say hopefully he'll be back in January. He won't be back in January. But he's number 1. Vitor Belfort, number 2. Number 3, Marco Huas. They say we hope to see him back. He's currently in negotiations with UFC. And then number 4 is Maurice Smith. And then number 5 is Dan Severn. Who the fuck made these rankings? Dan Severn is a fucking Triple Crown champion, just lost the undisputed fight between the super fight title and the ultimate tournament belt. He was almost just the first heavyweight champion, but okay, whatever. They say that they're trying to make Severn versus Vitor for the October card, which is UFC 15 Collision Course. More on that in the next review, which, funnily enough, won't be on UFC. And so finally, mercifully, the time has arrived for the UFC heavyweight title fight, Maurice Smith versus Mark Coleman. Commentary tells us that Maurice Smith has never lost a title fight before. And we hear from Maurice Smith, who says that Coleman punches like a girl. And he might have power, but he has no technique. This was actually quite a funny pre-fight interview. But again, I have no problem with the pre-fight comments. That's not the issue here. The issue is when you just stuff filler content of stuff that's meaningless that we've already seen before in between all these fights. That's what pisses me off. So Coleman then takes that personally. He says that I can shoot from further away than he can kick and fancies a grappler's chances against a striker. But we're about to find out. Bruce Buffer did it again, does the introductions, and here we go. Seconds into the fight, Coleman gets the takedown and just slams headbutts, just spams them over and over again, follows up with the hands, and we're stuck. We are in the guard here, which is a staple of these super fights, staple of these title fights. we're stuck here in the guard for a minute or 5. Maurice is able to land some shots from the bottom. Nothing really significant landing, but he is still hitting shots. The shots from Coleman have really dried up. And besides that sort of initial burst he had at the start of the fight, we're around the 5-minute mark and there hasn't been any headbutts from Coleman, any real strikes of note. The best shots were honestly some of the elbows that Smith was throwing from the bottom, which is not really what you expect having watched Coleman's previous fights. But at the 5-minute mark, Coleman passes guard finally to side control. Maurice panics, turns over, just giving his back to Coleman. Horrible decision. Coleman then looks for the choke before Maurice quickly then turns back over to lay on his back. But Coleman's now in mount. He starts dropping some bombs on Maurice, who stays composed under fire, to be honest. He does well. But then when the punches stop, he then gives up his back again, straight into the fucking Anthony Smith's favourite position before we then move back into half guard. It's kind of frantic, but slow-paced frantic. It's so weird. I can't describe it any other way than that. The crowd starts actually chanting for Maurice Smith, which I was shocked at. I thought Coleman would have been their guy just because he's been here before and he's been pretty dominant. But that might honestly work against him. Like when you win a lot, people just then kind of want to see you lose. But Coleman then looks for the same neck crank that he's beaten guys like Severn with, although it looks like he's moving in for an arm triangle. It allows Smith to actually escape and get back to the feet. Coleman shoots, doesn't get it, and Smith lands a high kick. Coleman is getting back to his feet now. I think this is perfectly legal because Coleman's knee isn't on the ground. He is like 2 feet firmly planted. This is perfectly legal to me. I don't know if you can tell in the photo there, but Coleman's knee is definitely off the ground. The kick is 100% legal. And Mark Coleman, to be fair to him, just eats it. He then has like a delayed reaction, as though only after the fight gets separated by Big John, he then acts as though, oh wow, that actually really hurt. But Big John steps in, breaks up the fight, and says to Smith that was an illegal strike. He separates both fighters back to their corner. I thought that it looked good, to be honest. Bruce Beck says, oh, that was close, and Jeff Blatnick agrees with him. So they are both looking at that thinking, I think he was actually standing. So, I mean, I don't think they wanted to go completely against the referee's call, but I'm with the commentators here. Like, they are definitely thinking that was a legal strike. The fight then restarts. Coleman doesn't even leave his corner. Like, he is so gassed. Maurice Smith lands some leg kicks, unnecessarily goes for the high kick, and then Coleman just easily ducks, gets the takedown, and we're back to half guard, where Smith again honestly lands the better shots here from the bottom, and Coleman transitions from guard to side control. We go back to half guard as the crowd chant again for Maurice. Big John screams, keep it working. Coleman attempts the neck crank and Maurice reverses it and is able to get back to his feet. I am shocked at how well he's doing. And Maurice lands a nice kick on the feet. Nice right hand with 30 seconds left to go of regulation. Mark Coleman looks like he's about to die, right? Before we get into our 3-minute overtime, he looks finished already. Maurice, like, to this point, has landed the more damaging strikes, however few of them, whilst Coleman has had all the control time on the ground. So it just kind of depends what the judges value here. I personally would give it to Maurice, but I mean, you never know. Coleman looks like his stomach is about to fall out of his arsehole. Just absolute death. He is completely fucked. Cannot stop looking at the clock as Maurice Smith just throws more leg kicks. This has to feel like an eternity for Mark Coleman in there. Coleman shoots and misses, and now Maurice is scared to throw kicks, but like he just bides his time, sits back before throwing this combo 2-2-1-2 high kick, and Coleman just stands there and like hands on his knees. He can't even breathe. Maurice now starts throwing leg kicks and you can feel the tide turn in the fight. It's amazing. And he's just staying at range. So Coleman has a further distance to shoot, making the takedown more difficult. He knows he's landed the better strikes. He has had the bigger moments and he's probably up now in the judge's mind heading into the final period of overtime. Coleman again, like modern day heavyweight style, stands there, hands on knees, completely fucked, can't breathe, no cardio, Maurice Smith, when we seen this against Don Frye, like his cardio is so fucked, but Maurice Smith is landing more kicks. Big John stops the fight at first glance for literally no reason, just letting Coleman get his breath back, but after you rewatch it, he stopped the fight because the straps on Smith's gloves had come undone, so he's fixing that, and then the lights in the arena just turn off or down. I have no idea what happened. The lighting is just all fucked up. Commentary says that the decision will likely go to Maurice Smith as more of the lights turn off, and that is the end of the fight. It goes the distance, 15 minutes of regulation, 2 3-minute overtimes, and it is time for the official decision as the lights are fucking off at this point. I don't know how half the lights are turning off and some of them are still on. I don't know if it's literally the emergency lights in the arena that are still on and like the main power source, like the lights just above the octagon, are turned off, but it's weird because in some angles it looks okay and in other angles it looks pitch black. I have no idea what's going on with that. But again, look, time for the official decision. Your winner and new undisputed UFC heavyweight champion of the world, Maurice Smith. And this is one of the biggest upsets in UFC to this point, at least Joe Rogan thinks so. And I'd probably agree. They thought that Mark Coleman would just take down and strike, or just take down this striker and finish him. But Smith had been training with Frank Shamrock, and he wasn't completely useless on the ground. He didn't really use any offensive ground game from the top, but he didn't have to. And it wouldn't have been smart for him at all to do that. All he needed to do was know how to survive and then be able to stand back up, and he did that very, very well. So Joe asked Maurice about the kick, whether Coleman was standing up or if he was grounded for the kick, of course. Smith says he couldn't tell, maybe he was down. Smith thought that he was up. Smith actually, again, he speaks really well here, doesn't even sound out of breath. And when you compare that to Mark Coleman, who looked like he was at death's door, is just insane. Maurice gets his belt from Mark Davey. He says that he's been trying to get a deal done since UFC 6, which I think would have been interesting to have seen him before this point. But Maurice thanks Lions Den and Frank Shamrock, and that draws this event to a close. Now, honestly, in recapping this event, let's start with the positives. Kevin Jackson, really good, really impressed, and I hope we get to see him back. I'm sure that we will. Mark Kerr, also impressive. I know that we will get to see him back, and the main event, whilst tedious at points because Coleman couldn't move, was still a spectacle just because of the contrasting styles. It felt like a true UFC fight where we have these two complete specialists in their own world coming together and fighting. Like it's the true essence of what this sport was, and the main event captured that. And so if you're going to go back and watch anything from this event, I would say you could watch the 2.5 minutes of Kevin Jackson, you could watch the 4 minutes of Mark Kerr, and if you're a real hardcore, you can watch the main event, which just sort of encapsulates the initial idea of UFC, which was all about, you know, specialists against each other to find out who the best is. Now, the remaining, 2.5 plus the 4 plus 21 is 27.5 minutes. Subtract the subtract the 2 hours and 37 minutes. That means the remaining 2 hours, 9 minutes and 30 seconds of this event was complete shit. Now, not worth your time watching. Joe Moreira should be put on trial for war crimes and espionage. Seriously, get this guy so far to fuck. I had to look up and see if he comes back to UFC. He doesn't. Thank God. But that's almost not good enough. Besides that, the constant filler, constant propaganda, constant interruptions and distractions between the fights that, like, just aren't necessary and not only don't add anything, but actively harm the enjoyment of the viewer. I hated most of this. Between these last two events, it's not been good. So thankfully we get a respite from this promotion, because now the time has finally arrived where the next time you see a retro review hit your sub box, it's going to be Pride FC. So the time is upon us for Pride 1, the inaugural event for Pride Fighting Championship. I cannot wait, because UFC is really pissing me off right now. But for the UFC fans out there, don't worry, because the name Gracie is present on Pride 1, alongside the likes of Oleg Taktarov, UFC 6 champion, who takes on the UFC 8 runner-up Gary Goodridge. Not only that, we have Dan Severn making his return to MMA. Some controversy there, which we will discuss. And he is taking on the one, the only Hawaiian fighting legend, Kimo. All of that and more, as Bash Rutten is on the call commentating on the event. It is sure to be a good one. Like this video, comment your own thoughts on the review, make sure to hit subscribe, and don't miss out on our visit to Japan before the UFC makes it there. So hit the notify bell, stay up to date with the content as it drops. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you all later. So UFC 15 Collision Course took place on October 17th, 1997 in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. We are firmly in the dark ages here, the underground era of UFC, folks. We return to form though with a banger video package. They tell the story of Mark Coleman, Maurice Smith, their fight at UFC 14, 1 minute, 6 minutes, 11 minutes. They show that nasty combo from Mo Smith, and this was really good. I loved this. This was terrific. They then preview tonight's action. In our title fight, we have Mo Smith versus Tank Abbott. And in the super fight, we have Randy Couture versus Vitor Belfort. And we are just going to get into this mess. And in fact, no, in just a second. Bear with me until they mention the name Dan Severn. Those from Pride 1, that retro review, they'll already know. But we open up the gate and come up to Mississippi, and we're at Casino Magic, the first ever barge concept casino in the world. And this thing is small, but as I said, this is the dark era. Bruce Beck is on commentary with Jeff Blatnick, and he dares to utter the name Dan Severn. Now, the story of this card, how did we get here? At UFC 14, commentary say Dan Severn is in negotiations to fight Vitor Belfort at UFC 15. This was before we knew Mark Coleman would lose the belt. So Mark Coleman does lose the belt, and everything's still okay, because we plan on having the rematch at UFC 15, Smith versus Coleman 2. What ends up happening is Mark Coleman gets injured. He can't come back for the rematch, so instead of giving the title fight to Vitor Belfort, the winner of a tournament, winner of the super fight, the next highest ranked contender, we give the title fight to Dan Severn, the guy who just lost to Coleman at UFC 12. So a week prior to this event, we had the first ever Pride event. Now, Pride wanted to have Dan Severn on the card versus Kimo. There is also the rumour Tank Abbott was supposed to face Kimo, but Tank opted not to go. They got Severn versus Kimo. Now, we just reviewed Pride 1. The video is on the channel now, go and watch that. But Dan Severn injured his hand in that fight against Kimo, and now can't take the title fight here tonight. And this would mark the end of Dan Severn and UFC's relationship for a long time. But now, because Severn is out, we have Tank Abbott in the title fight, even although he just lost to Vitor Belfort. How is he not getting the title shot? So instead of Coleman versus Smith, Severn versus Smith, or Severn versus Vitor, or even the fight that should have been made, Maurice Smith versus Vitor Belfort, we now have Smith versus Tank and Vitor versus Couture in a title eliminator, when Vitor has already beaten the guy chosen to replace Severn in the title fight. What the fuck are we doing here? Okay, now hopefully you followed that, okay, because it hurt my head just reading it. So we move on. Thankfully, we run down the card, our title fight, Smith versus Tank, our super fight, Vitor versus Couture, and Mark Kerr is back to defend his medal from UFC 14 in the heavyweight tournament. And we only have one tournament tonight, guys, so does that mean that we'll be able to fit this event into a 2-hour time slot? No, it fucking doesn't. We are going for another 2.5 hours. These long shows, I swear to God, are the 13th reason why. We have Joe Rogan in the back talking to the doctor. He says Dan Severn is a one-handed fighter. They can't let him compete tonight. And we now open up with alternate fights. Fuck, man. So here, guys, you're losing a tournament, but you're getting the jabronis from the alternate fights. We have Harry Moskowitz, whose nickname is Dirty, and his second name is Moskowitz, and all I can think about is Eric Cartman. He's a local Mississippi guy, so you know what that means, he's getting beat. And he's up against Alex Hunter, a jiu-jitsu fighter, so it's not even as though we're going to get like entertaining scraps here in the alternate fights. Like, we're getting 1997 jiu-jitsu bullshit. And usually I would gloss over the alternate fights because like they just show us the finish of the fight whenever the alternate winner is actually called upon to enter the tournament. But this time they decide we're going to cut a tournament and just show the alternate fights. So to kick off the card, I suppose this is like a spiritual precursor to the prelim fights. But they are part of the actual pay-per-view broadcast. They are part of the official event. So I do have to comment on them, even if it is against my will and under protest. So Hunter beat Moskowitz by split decision, no overtime, boring as fuck. There's my comments on that. So Joe Hamilton is actually our referee, by the way. For the first time since UFC 1, Big John hasn't been refereeing the official opener for these cards. Hamilton normally does all the alternate fights, but this is the first time they've actually been televised as an official part of the pay-per-view. They obviously film all the alternate fights if they need to show them when the alternate is then called upon to enter the tournament. But as an official opener to the show now, Hamilton is still refereeing the alternates. Big John will end up taking the tournament in the super fights though. And whilst we're here at the alternate fights, let's just break down some rule changes real quick. This is the first event where real restrictions have been put on striking. So we know about the eye pokes, the fish hooking now, but headbutts, dick shots, strikes to the back of the head and neck, head stomps, hair pulling, knees and kicks to the head of a grounded opponent. Now this is funny because in our Pride 1 review, Gary Goodridge landed a hellacious soccer kick to Oleg Tiktarov before KOing him and putting him on a stretcher. But I wonder if that had anything to do with this rule change. Like, we know they watched Pride. Besides fighters talking to each other about it, multiple UFC fighters were on that card and Severn got injured there. They know about it. So I wonder if they seen Goodridge pull that shit and thought, oh no, we need to stop that before somebody does it here. I remember at UFC 1, Gerard Jordeau hurt himself with a soccer kick, so that probably played a factor as well. But the next alternate fight, Dwayne Kaysen here, and like, see, when you see Olympic level freestyle wrestler, you already know that this guy's going to fucking win. Like, they talk about his relation to Leon and Mike Spinks, like, it's just done. I'll put the photo in here, but there was a brief moment where he grabs Door's ankles under his armpits, and I swear to God he was going for the Boston Crab. I genuinely thought we were about to see someone hit a fucking Walls of Jericho in an actual fight. That would have been insane. But look, Kaysen wins here with ground and pound. Actually pretty impressive. I have no idea how he makes heavyweight. They said he was, 215? There is no chance he is 215. But we've had some impressive middleweights, like Guy Mezger, Ortiz, Kevin Jackson. Frank Shamrock isn't far away from debuting. Like, I'm not going to pretend I want to see Jerry Bolander here, but he can also be included. Like, if they were to put Mark Schultz in there as well, Olympic champion, who we've seen at UFC 9, he was down as a middleweight when they spoke about him at UFC 14 when they done those rankings. But if we could actually pay these guys, we could get a fucking decent middleweight tournament going. But up next, we get the actual heavyweight tournament. We have the smashing machine Mark Kerr, played by Dwayne Johnson, up against Greg Stott. And you can guess what happens here, but we'll run through this anyway. So the Ranger, Greg Stott, is the founder of his own style. And I thought this was a thing of UFC's past, with John Hess coming up with SAFTA, or Joe Son coming up with Joe Son Do. I thought that being a practitioner and black belt of your own style was dead, but Stott out here proving otherwise. Now, his is called RIP, standing for Ranger International Performance, described as the most effective and expeditious form of hand-to-hand combat in the world. so you know how this fight is going. But he says that he's here with the RIP team to show why RIP rules and others rest in peace. And I cannot stop laughing at this guy. He comes out here wearing these fucking like really short cut off chino shorts, man. Like, what the fuck is up with this guy? Mark Kerr has pre-fight comments where he sounds again like just the most polite man. Oh, there's the Just Bleed guy. But Mark Kerr comes out here, sounds like the most polite man on the planet. He says he's working on his cardio. We'll see if he needs it. You can guess. Again. So the fight begins, 17 seconds in, the first strike of the fight, Mark Kerr smashes Stott with a knee in the clinch and kills him for the KO victory. Mark Kerr, again, just the nicest guy, doesn't follow up with any super necessary shots. He knees him in the face, KOs him, and just stands there waiting for Big John to dive in. We have like 4 people looking at Stott here, a damaging blow to the RIP team, nasty KO. And he gives another nice interview with Joe Rogan in the back. Like, that's the 3rd fastest knockout in UFC history. They put it down as 22 seconds, but he was done way before that. 22 seconds is how long it took for Big John, or no, for the clock to stop. Big John had stepped in well before that point, but 3rd fastest in UFC history behind Don Frye on Thomas Ramirez, 8 seconds, and Gary Goodridge beating Paul Herrera with those elbows in 13 seconds. Bruce Beck mentions this, and I should have put this in a previous video, I should have, but I didn't think it would be a recurring thing. They call the UFC reality combat, and like Jeff Blatnick using the phrase MMA for the first time at our last event, Bruce Beck is really pushing reality combat, so I just thought that was something to mention here. Like, reality combat or mixed martial arts, I'll let you guys decide which is better, comment below. But we then get interviews from Tank and Smith, nothing too much of note here. And we move into our next fight. We get Dave Beneteau versus Carlos Barreto. And for the sake of this fight, I'm just going to call these guys Dave and Carlos. And you'll know who's who, because those second names are just too similar and I will get them mixed up. So Carlos comes out here in the Vitor Belfort style gi with the flags on the shoulders and looks confused that he has to take it off before going into the octagon. This does not bode well. Dave comes out. We haven't seen him since the Ultimate 1995. He was the runner-up at UFC 5, losing to Dan Severn. We were supposed to see Dave at UFC 9. He was supposed to fight Gary Goodridge. He got injured by his training partner Mark Schultz, who stepped in to replace him and was actually very impressive. So since then he's been injured off and on. We haven't been able to see him for a while. And I thought Dave was okay. He was a fine fighter. Competent is probably the best way to put it. But that would get you far at those initial events because the level of competition now that, not that the level of competition is stacked now, but the average skill level of the fighter, I would say, has improved. It's not great, but it's still better. So they clinch to start the fight and Carlos immediately fouls. Just immediately when he hits him with a headbutt. Big John tells the judges and Bruce Beck tells us that it's 3 fouls and you're disqualified. We stay clinched for a while as Carlos continues to cheat holding on to the fence, but it doesn't get spotted by Big John, who splits the 2 up. After the restart, Carlos gets the takedown, Dave takes the back, fouls him again with strikes to the back of the head. And what the actual fuck is this idiot doing? Seriously, he should be disqualified already, only after 2 minutes. But again, let's not let the rules get in the way of a fair fight. They clinch against the fence again. Carlos grabs the fence again and Big John tells him to stop holding the fence, but just lets him away with it. Carlos pulls guard like an idiot and then lets Dave smash him with ground and pound before they get back to the feet and then break. Dave this time gets the takedown at 5 minutes into the fight and nothing comes from it. We break again, and while I'm watching this, I'm just thinking Mark Kerr would destroy both of these guys. Even like at the same time, I think Kerr would beat both these guys. Dave keeps putting his hands on his knees, pretending as though he's trying to taunt his opponent, which is what commentary is trying to tell us. He isn't trying to taunt him, he is genuinely gassed. He's moving so slow, but manages to get a takedown anyway. I'm not even going to call out the fence grabbing anymore because both these guys could have been disqualified at this point. And now we're just stuck in guard. We make it to the feet, only to clinch against the fence again. And it gets broken up for stalling. Another takedown for Dave. We stay here until the end of regulation before then going to a 3-minute overtime. Before the overtime starts, Big John tells Carlos and his corner to stop holding the fence or he will be disqualified, as though that matters at this point. Only 30 seconds in, he clinches Dave against the cage, holds the fence again. Can we just disqualify this guy already? Carlos now gets the takedown, absolutely zero work on the ground, some short punches, no impact, more fence grabbing, fuck this guy. Close fight, neither guy really took this and made it theirs, no robbery here, the win's really up for grabs, but the judges come to a unanimous decision and Dave Beneteau is your winner. He is going to the final to face Mark Kerr. Good luck, buddy, we know how that one is going to go. But will he make it there? He has an interview with Joe Rogan where he says, I'll see how I feel. I don't feel injured, but I don't know if I want to fight him. Him being Mark Kerr. I'm paraphrasing here, but that is nearly what he said. That's the general gist. He said, I'm going to wait a minute and then make an executive decision whether I'll fight Mark Kerr or not. Straight pussy from Dave. Fuck this guy as well. And just to spoil this now, this is the last time we see Dave Beneteau in UFC. Good. So next up, we have our first of two super fights, Vitor Belfort and Randy Couture. We get some propaganda for the Phenom here, and nothing we haven't really seen before, but I will just say this again, it is ridiculous that this guy is not getting the title fight after a tournament win and a super fight win. We then hear from Randy Couture, and they are pushing the angle that this fight will go to the mat, and we'll finally see Vitor on the ground, so we'll see if they're right about that. As we go to the octagon for the entrances and the introductions, the fight starts and the first contact is made by Vitor to clinch against the cage. Nothing comes of it before they break. Well, nothing comes of it besides half of Randy Couture's shorts, which are now ripped all the way down one side. Unbelievably distracting. But these two, I'm not kidding, okay? These two, just standing there, and the speed at which they move, you can tell that these two are on another level compared to everybody else. And as I said that, as I wrote that down, Randy Couture gets the takedown and shows he's just like everybody else who gets the takedown and then just fucking sits on it. He finally takes the risk, going for the neck crank, can't get it, ends up in the guard, which is literally the worst case scenario. Like, going for the finish when you're on top in 1997 UFC, rarely do you see people even, like, get up. They just try to get to full guard. That's literally the worst case scenario. And you're still on top. That's why I get so pissed off when people get on top and don't do anything with it. Because worst case scenario, you're still in the dominant position. So we end up sitting in the guard for a few minutes. Couture tries to transition to side control, skipping the half guard, and Vitor is able to get a sprawl before Couture hits the grounded opponent with knees, and nothing gets done by Big John here. Commentary, they don't even mention that it's against the rules. Again, let's not let the rules get in the way of a fair fight. But we get back to the feet, clinched, and Couture lands the better shots, I would say, some nice uppercuts. He then just slams the shit out of them, hurting Vitor, and he is tired and slumps to the ground or tries to pull guard, basically the same thing. Like, when you pull guard, you're basically just admitting defeat. Couture lands more knees to the grounded opponent. Again, the rules make that illegal, but let's not let the rules get in the way of a fair fight. Vitor gives up the back. Couture gets the finish on Vitor, and he clearly knows the rules because none of those last punches were to the back of the head, even though that's all that was open. He was going round the side to hit the face, and Couture wins. The crowd chants USA because Randy Couture's success is also that of the nations, and Vitor is lying on the ground here. He is in a bad way. I will admit to this was domination from Couture, and commentary say that this is a bigger upset than Smith versus Coleman, which might sound ridiculous given what Randy Couture's reputation would become. However, like, Couture's already won a tournament. He's not completely useless. And Smith versus Coleman was a bigger upset. Coleman was 6-0, 2 tournament wins, first heavyweight champion. And Smith had a negative MMA record, 3-6, by the way, before that fight. So that was a far bigger upset. But we see Randy in the back, and Bruce Beck calls Joe Rogan Smoking Joe Rogan. How long did that nickname last? Randy dedicated the fight to a friend of his and says that he was just having fun in there. Now, the heavyweight tournament final, Dave Beneteau isn't in there, and Dwayne Cason is back. And to be honest, this is the best case scenario. These two are the best fighters in the tournament, so at least they're in the final. But like we said earlier, Cason is 20 years old and small for the weight class. I have no idea how he made heavyweight. And Mark Kerr, notoriously massive. Dave Beneteau out here saying he could beat Mark Kerr if all things were equal. He couldn't. But because he had a long fight beforehand, he doesn't want to fight Mark Kerr. Dave Beneteau is the biggest pussy ever. Like, throw him in the pile with Hoyce Gracie, Joe Moreira, Tony Frickland, all these other guys we've seen to this point who are completely bitch-made and soft. So, you know, like, what you signed up for when you enter a tournament. Fucking play the game or don't. You know what the rules are. You're in control of how long your fight goes. Completely pussy. Just, he isn't even making up an injury. Like, he's just saying, I don't want to fight Mark Kerr. And Joe Rogan says, that's a smart decision, and Dave will be back. No, he fucking won't, okay? Dave will not be back in UFC. And look, I wouldn't want to fight Mark Kerr either at this point. But when you sign up for it, that's what you get paid for. That's what you agree to. You do it, because if the shoe's on the other foot, and Mark Kerr was in a 15-minute fight, and Dave was in there for 15 seconds, then he would want to fight Mark Kerr. So it's good they don't have Dave back, because we cannot encourage that behaviour. We cannot reward that behaviour. We get Mark Kerr out here and commentaries talking about his relationship with Mark Coleman, the Olympic wrestlers. We even get a name drop of Kurt Angle here, who won the 1996 Olympic gold medal in wrestling with a broken neck, because he is just that guy. Kerr, look, the fight starts, Kerr gets the takedown, Cason turns, give the back to Kerr, Kerr gets the rear naked choke and the win. So they announce Mark Kerr as the winner, and they call him the specimen. I think I prefer the smashing machine. He gets presented with a medal, and that's 2 in a row for Mark Kerr, and this is his last tournament. He says he's looking forward to fighting single bouts. He names Randy Couture, Vitor Belfort, Maurice Smith, and he just gets it. They ask him, how do you feel about fighting other wrestlers? But he correctly says the thing that makes MMA work is the different disciplines fighting each other, and there's enough top guys at other disciplines that we can fight each other without having to fight the guys from our same discipline. And again, I can't say it enough, he comes across really well. But sadly, this is the last time we see Mark Kerr in UFC. Luckily for the channel, though, he will be in Pride. So you'll actually be on Pride 2, which will be the next Pride event we watch in 1998, which will be in a few reviews' time. We have a few UFCs before then. We then get Big John McCarthy propaganda. They show him berating fighters, abusing fighters, even attacking other fighters. No, they don't, but he does some nice promo here for the sport, and it explains the Let's Get It On thing coming from boxing referee Mills Lane before Jerry Cooney and Larry Holmes before the fight. He told them both, let's get it on. Big John took that and decided that's how he would start fights. So he didn't steal it, he borrowed and adapted. Commentators tell us how big a part John McCarthy plays in the sport, which he does, to be fair. This video is already going long, but you can look this up on your own. We might need to do a Big John video at some point and his impact on MMA and UFC, but we then move on to Maurice Smith and Tank Abbott videos before the main event. We get the entrances, we get the introductions, and the time has arrived. Here we go. Let's get it on. The main event for the title, Tank versus Smith. Tank out the gates quick, unable to land anything really. Good defense by Smith, but Tank then shoots and misses. After that, Tank slows down big time as Smith lands a couple of low kicks and the crowd starts chanting for Tank. Tank is able to clinch Smith against the fence. Then on the break, Tank actually drops Smith. Like, it was as though Smith tried to duck and Tank was able to just catch him on the way down, knocks him down. But now we're here in the guard. And Tank is actually able to transition to side control before then trying to get to mount and getting sent back to guard. Tank is able to land in the guard as Smith looks to isolate the arm for a Kimura, just to make sort of Tank think about like his arm. Like, it's not really a true attempt, but he throws it in there just to make Tank think, and he ends up just letting it go. But at 6 minutes, we get Tank to side control and then back to fucking guard, and Smith lands elbows to the back of the head. Again, against the rules. Don't let the rules get in the way of a fair fight, though. Smith tries for the arm again, can't get it, and Big John stands this up. Tank looks really tired and he's like noticeably limping now. And look, I only counted 2 leg kicks, but the corner of Smith noticed this is a Frank Shamrock special here. This is his coaching expertise. They tell Maurice here straight for the low kicks when this fight restarts. And Smith lands 2 low kicks. It might have been 3 actually, fuck. And like irrelevant. He lands a couple of low kicks and the fight is called. Tank cannot stand on the leg and the crowd start booing. So we have our first official leg kick stoppage. We had Marco Huas knock down Varland with a leg kick, but that fight was finished with ground and pound. Here's an official leg kick stoppage. After the fight, we get an interview. Maurice doesn't even really sound out of breath. He says that Dan Severn and Chemo had a fight last week. They don't mention Pride by name, but says that that fight happened and he expected Severn to pull out, so he was already anticipating a change in opponent. He gives Tank credit, says that he's a tough fighter, and now here is Tank in the fucking 86th for life shirt, and he says he's been partying. Joe Rogan asked Tank if he wants a rematch. Tank says he wants a lot of rematches, but puts the loss down to the fact that it was short notice and he's been, in his words, partying for the last however long. Now, this event here not only marks the end of the road for Mark Kerr, but also Bruce Beck. And, like, at our next event, we will be introduced to Mike Goldberg, who would go on to become the voice of UFC, famously alongside Joe Rogan. And that was a partnership for a long time. Those two covered some of the most iconic fights and moments in UFC. Now, we still have to wait for Rogan to join the desk, but I wanted to have something here for at the end for Bruce Beck. The guy really got on my tits at the start. Right, and that's all documented. You can go back and watch those early reviews, but he was standing next to Jim Brown, one of the worst of all time, and I will say that Bruce improved a lot. He got better after every event, and next to Jeff Blatnick, those two had a really good partnership. When we'd have guests on, like Don Wilson or other fighters, he wasn't overbearing, he was really good, and he let Jeff explain what was happening and then just chipped in when necessary. I think he was pretty good, but sadly it is all over and Mike Goldberg will now be at the desk. As for this show, not bad. Not going to be the guy ad nauseum complaining about the amount of filler here, but yes, there was too much. And I wish we could just start with the tournament, and if we need the alternates, we can show the highlights from their alternate fight, you know, just like we used to. As far as the actual content, I enjoyed Mark Kerr. It's sad to see him leave, but at least we'll get to watch him in Pride, on this channel at least. We put in, we put in 2 good performances, and we're never going to talk about Dave Beneteau ever again, thankfully. Dwayne Kaysen steps up, he had a good alternate fight, but I mean, Kerr was just too big when it actually got to the tournament. The super fight was an unexpected one-sided squash for Randy Couture, who put in a good performance. Vitor really should have had the fucking title fight here, and Tank could have fought Couture in an eliminator, but oh well, we're here now. And the title fight between Tank and Smith, honestly not bad. Okay, most of the action took place on the ground, but there was actual attempted action with transitions and such. Fight ends via leg kicks. Kind of anticlimactic finish, but still decisive, so I'm not mad about that. And this actually brings me on to my final point, my closing arguments here. There was 2 signs in the crowd here that people had brought themselves. These weren't planted, you could tell. And these signs literally said, Jiu-Jitsu is Jiu-Shitsu, and the other one says, Lion's Den is full of straight pussies. Now, I agree, and this is my point. MMA fans don't change. Real MMA fans do not switch up, okay? I'm commentating on these reviews or on these events 30 years after the fact, okay? And I'm saying now what actual fans are saying then about these fucking guys going in there with no intent to finish in what future years would just evolve into this mad dash for control time and decisions, which we still see to this day. And people try to gaslight you into thinking that this is not only acceptable, but good MMA. Real fans are the fucking guys here in 1997. Maybe not like the guy on the screen right now with the Just Bleed, because it's not even about just seeing straight violence and just bloodbaths, but it's real fucking MMA fans want to see intent to finish. When I was talking about Tank on the ground there with Maurice Smith, actually attempting to transition to get into a better position to finish the fight, not just to sit there on top of him and try and fucking eke out a decision. Actual intent is to finish the fight. I just wanted to put that in there now, or at the end of this video, because the contrast to modern MMA fans where there's almost a willingness to accept Chimaev just lying on top of DDP or Islam just lying on top of JDM, and then you're told, well, that's just like the highest level of the sport, and it's like, you're not a fucking real fan. And I don't like getting into this whole I like this and you can't like that argument, but to sit there and think that people want to see this and should accept this as being the highest level of the sport, where even in 1997 people are calling this style bullshit, like, I had to speak on that there at the end just for my own sanity. Next review on the channel, UFC 15.5 when UFC goes to Japan for UFC Japan Ultimate Japan, where we have two tournaments, two debutants, Frank Shamrock and Sakuraba. Tank Abbott and Vitor Belfort will be on the card. Main event heavyweight title on the line, Maurice Smith versus Randy Couture. This should be a good one, folks, so leave your comments on this review below on this card. Like this video, subscribe for more content, hit the notify bell to stay up to date with the content as it drops. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all next time.